A gender reveal party for a millionaire's baby. The perfect wife, the perfect life, all displayed under a canopy of pink and blue balloons. But what happens when the perfect illusion shatters? This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story about a woman who was pushed to the edge only to reveal that she'd been 10 steps ahead the entire time. When her husband's pregnant mistress crashed the party to destroy her life, she had a surprise waiting for them both. A surprise that would unravel a web of deceit and bring a powerful man to his knees. Stick with me because this story is a masterclass in revenge. The air at the Astor estate didn't just feel expensive, it smelled of it. A carefully curated blend of salt water from the Long Island Sound, the thousands of white roses flown in from Ecuador, and the subtle clean scent of old money. It was the scent of Barrett Astor's world, a world he had built and one his wife, Jocelyn Wren Astor, had meticulously decorated. Today, that world was painted in saccharine shades of baby pink and powder blue. Their gender reveal party was like everything Barrett did, an exercise in glorious excess. A marquee the size of a ballroom stood gleaming on the east lawn, its silk-draped ceiling shimmering with fairy lights. A string quartet played Vivaldi near a gushing champagne fountain, while Michelin-starred chefs artfully arranged canapes that looked more like jewelry than food. 200 of New York's finest bankers, tech moguls, art dealers, and the women with surgically perfected smiles who accompanied them floated across the manicured grass. They were all there to celebrate the next chapter of the Astor dynasty, their baby. Jocelyn moved through the crowd, a fixed, serene smile on her face. At 7 months pregnant, she felt like a ship in full sail, majestic and slow. Her custom-made organza dress, a gentle cream, flowed around her pronounced bump. To the outside world, she was the epitome of grace and fortune. Mrs. Jocelyn Astor, wife of the real estate titan, Barrett Astor, soon to be the mother of his heir. They saw the 20-carat diamond on her finger, the effortless elegance, the adoring husband who never strayed too far from her side. "There's my beautiful Madonna." Barrett's voice, a smooth baritone that could charm investors out of billions, purred into her ear. He wrapped an arm around her waist, his other hand coming to rest possessively on her belly. The baby kicked a sharp jab against his palm. "He knows his father." Barrett chuckled, his smile broad and brilliant for the cameras. Oh yes, there were cameras. A photographer from Vogue and a videographer documenting every perfect moment for their family archives. Barrett understood the currency of perception better than anyone. "Or she's telling you to give her some space." Jocelyn replied, her voice light, betraying none of the acid that had been churning in her stomach for months. He kissed her temple, a public display of affection that felt as cold and rehearsed as a line from a play. "Nonsense, the kid's a genius already. Look at this, Izzy." He gestured around them at the sea of influential faces. "This is all for them. Born on a launch pad to the moon." Jocelyn looked at him. Really looked at him. At 42, Barrett Astor was a masterpiece of masculine power. Tall, with expertly tailored clothes that hugged his athletic frame, sharp blue eyes, and a jawline that could cut glass. He had the kind of looks and wealth that made people forgive him for anything. For arrogance, for ruthlessness, for infidelity. He thought his wife was his greatest acquisition. Beautiful from a good, though not wealthy family, intelligent enough to be a charming hostess, and docile enough not to question his authority. He believed she was blissfully unaware, content in her gilded cage. He had always underestimated her. That was his greatest mistake. Her best friend Amelia caught her eye from across the lawn. Her expression was a mixture of awe at the spectacle and concern. She was one of the few people who knew the real Jocelyn, the one who had graduated top of her class from Columbia Law before trading a legal career for Barrett's world. She knew Jocelyn's quietness wasn't weakness. As Jocelyn excused herself, promising Barrett she'd be right back, Amelia intercepted her near the rose gardens. "This is insane, Bella," she whispered, her eyes wide. "He didn't just throw a party, he staged a coronation. Theatrics are his specialty." Jocelyn said, her hand instinctively cradling her bump. "How are you holding up? And I mean really?" Amelia's gaze was piercing. Jocelyn took a deep breath, the scent of roses suddenly cloying. The dress is tight, my feet are swollen, and the smile is starting to cramp my cheeks. Other than that, just peachy. Bella. I'm fine, Amelia. I promise. The show is almost over. Her voice was low but firm. She had a plan. A plan she had been meticulously crafting for 112 days. Ever since the day she found the first receipt. Not for a necklace or a secret trip, but for a recurring rent payment on a West Village apartment she'd never seen. It was such a boringly corporate way to discover a person's life was a lie. No lipstick on the collar, just a PDF in a misdirected email. From there, the rest of the lies unraveled with terrifying ease. The late nights at the office, the business trips to the Caymans that were a little too frequent. She had hired a private investigator, the best money could buy her money from the trust her late grandfather had left her, a detail Barrett had always found quaint and unnecessary. The investigator, a discreet man named Mr. Harding, was brutally efficient. He gave her a folder filled with photographs, dates, and times. The other woman's name was Chloe Jenkins, a 26-year-old gallery assistant, pretty eager and utterly disposable in Barrett's world. The real blow, the one that had knocked the air from Jocelyn's lungs and solidified her resolve, came a month ago. Mr. Harding's final report. Chloe Jenkins was pregnant too, about 4 months along. In that moment, staring at a grainy photo of Chloe leaving an OB/GYN clinic, her own baby fluttering inside her, Jocelyn didn't shatter. A strange glacial calm settled over her. Barrett hadn't just betrayed their vows. He had tried to invalidate her entire existence, their child's future. He was building a shadow family, a backup dynasty. The sheer breathtaking arrogance of it was what sealed his fate. He wasn't just going to lose his wife. He was going to lose everything. Jocelyn Barrett, a voice boomed. It was Marcus Thorne Barrett's right-hand man and lawyer, a shark in a Savile Row suit. It's almost time for the main event. The chopper is 5 minutes out. Of course, Barrett hadn't settled for a simple cake cutting or a box of balloons. No, he had arranged for a helicopter to fly overhead and release colored smoke, pink or blue, to announce the gender of their child to the world. "We're coming, Marcus," Barrett called out, striding over to take his wife's hand. He squeezed it, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring but felt like a manacle. "Ready, my love." "More than ready," Jocelyn said, meeting his gaze. For the first time in months, the smile she gave him was genuine. It was the smile of a predator who knows the trap has been set and the prey is walking right into it. He mistook it for wifely devotion. They walked to the center of the lawn where a large white platform had been erected. Their guests gathered around them, their phones held high, a sea of expectant faces. The collective net worth of the people standing on that lawn could have bailed out a small country. They were here for the show, and Jocelyn was determined not to disappoint them. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of helicopter blades began to beat in the distance, growing steadily louder. The sound of impending doom. Barrett's arm was tight around her, his body radiating a smug, triumphant energy. He was the king of his castle, about to announce his heir. He felt untouchable. Jocelyn subtly scanned the perimeter of the crowd. She saw Amelia giving her a shaky thumbs up. She saw Marcus Thorne looking proud. And standing near the main gate, almost hidden by an ancient oak tree, she saw a familiar face from Mr. Harding's report. A woman with a sharp suit and an even sharper expression. Her lawyer, Eleanor Vance. She wasn't just a guest. She was the overture to the opera of Barrett's destruction. Everything was in place. The helicopter was almost overhead now, a deafening roar that drowned out the string quartet. A giant screen behind them showed a live feed of the sky. Barrett squeezed Jocelyn's shoulder, his voice ecstatic. "Look, Izzy, this is it. The moment we've been waiting for." She looked up at the sky, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the serene confidence of a man who believes he holds all the cards, who believes his wife is a beautiful, fragile doll. He was waiting for a puff of pink or blue smoke. He had no idea the storm that was about to break. And then, as if summoned by the chaos in her own heart, she saw her. Pushing her way through the impeccably dressed crowd, a flash of fury in a too-tight red dress. She was younger than Jocelyn Blonde, and her face was a mask of desperate resolve. She wasn't pregnant enough for it to be obvious to a stranger. But Jocelyn, who had studied her photographs like a general studying battle plans, could see the slight telltale curve of her belly. Chloe Jenkins had arrived, uninvited, and the first act of the play was about to begin. Jocelyn felt a thrill, cold and sharp, cut through her. Barrett followed her gaze, and for the first time that day his perfect smile faltered. His face went pale, a stark contrast to his sun-kissed tan. The show was about to get so much better. The world seemed to slow down, the deafening roar of the helicopter blades fading into a dull, distant pulse in Jocelyn's ears. All she could see was Chloe Jenkins, a slash of crimson against the pale pastels of the party, moving with the relentless purpose of a heat-seeking missile. The crowd, sensing a disruption in the carefully orchestrated perfection, began to part before her, murmuring and turning like a startled herd. Barrett's hand on Jocelyn's waist went rigid, his fingers digging into her hip. He muttered a curse under his breath so low only she could hear it. What the hell is she doing here? I don't know, Barrett, Jocelyn said, her voice a placid sea in his storm of panic. You tell me. She's your acquaintance, isn't she? His head snapped toward his wife, his blue eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and fear. The mask of the doting husband was gone, replaced by the cornered animal she knew lurked beneath. Stay here, he commanded, his voice a harsh whisper. He started to move toward Chloe, no doubt intending to intercept her, to placate her, to hustle her away before she could detonate the bomb she so clearly carried. But Jocelyn placed a hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. No, she said, her voice still calm yet carrying an authority that made him pause. Don't you dare leave my side. Our guests are watching. We are about to welcome our child. You will stand here with your wife. Every word was a steel shard wrapped in velvet. He was trapped. To abandon his wife now on the platform with hundreds of eyes and a Vogue photographer capturing every flicker of emotion would be a fatal error. He would look like a cad running from a scene. So he stood frozen, a statue of impotent rage, as Chloe closed the distance. She stopped at the foot of the small platform, her chest heaving. Her eyes, red-rimmed and wild, were locked on Barrett. She ignored Jocelyn completely, as if she were nothing more than a piece of scenery. Barrett, she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry over the now idling helicopter. How could you? I've been calling you all day. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The murmuring intensified. Phones which had been pointing at the sky now pivoted to capture this far more interesting drama. Marcus Thorne started pushing through the crowd, his face grim, but he was too far away. Barrett attempted to regain control, plastering a strained, dismissive smile on his face. I'm sorry you must be confused, he said, his voice artificially loud. This is a private party. Confused? Chloe let out a laugh that was half sob, half shriek. Oh, I'm not confused. You're the one who's confused if you think you can ignore me. If you think you can stand up here with her and pretend I don't exist. She finally turned her venomous gaze on Jocelyn. And you? She sneered, looking Jocelyn up and down, her eyes lingering on the swollen belly. You think you've won, don't you? Standing there looking so perfect. Well, he doesn't love you. He loves me. He told me. Jocelyn remained silent, her expression one of detached, regal sorrow. She had to play her part. The wronged, dignified wife. It was crucial for what was to come. She let Chloe have her moment. She let the crowd see her as the hysterical interloper, the homewrecker. This woman is clearly unwell, Barrett announced to the guests, his hand gesturing vaguely for security, who were hesitating, unsure how to handle the situation without making it worse. I apologize to everyone for this unfortunate disruption. Unwell! Chloe's voice rose to a scream. I'll show you unwell, you lying bastard! And then she delivered the line Jocelyn had been waiting for. The line she knew Chloe would deliver because Mr. Harding's report had included transcripts of her tearful phone calls to her own best friend. She was desperate and she believed Barrett's lies. She put a hand on her own stomach, a defiant echo of Jocelyn's maternal pose. "I'm pregnant," she declared, her voice ringing across the silent lawn. "I'm pregnant with Barrett Astor's son. He promised me. He promised he was leaving you to be with me and our baby." Chaos. Absolute delicious chaos. The whispers erupted into audible chatter. The Vogue photographer was clicking away a predator sensing a kill. Jocelyn saw the flash of dozens of phone cameras. This moment was already being uploaded, shared, commented on. The Astor gender reveal had just become the social media event of the year for all the wrong reasons. Barrett looked utterly decimated. His face, which had been pale, was now a ghastly shade of gray. He looked from Chloe's determined face to his wife's serene one, then out at the sea of his peers, their expressions ranging from shock to pity to poorly concealed schadenfreude. His perfect world, his carefully curated image, was being torn to shreds in real time. "It's a lie," he stammered, his voice losing its commanding tone. "She's lying. She's obsessed. I barely know her." It was a weak, pathetic defense, and everyone knew it. Chloe laughed again, a sound stripped of all humor. "Barely know me? I have texts, Barrett. Hundreds of them. Pictures. I have the lease to the apartment you pay for. The one where you told me you loved me, where you said your wife was just a business arrangement, that your marriage was cold and loveless." Every word was a nail in his coffin. He was flailing, drowning in the public square, and he looked at Jocelyn, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. He expected her to do something, to faint, to cry, to run off in shame. He expected her to create a diversion, to be the hysterical pregnant wife so he could play the part of the beleaguered husband managing two emotional women. She would do none of those things. Instead, she finally spoke. Her voice, amplified by the microphone still clipped to her dress, was clear, calm, and carried across the entire lawn, silencing the gossip instantly. "Actually," Jocelyn said, turning to face the crowd, her hand still resting on her baby bump, "she's not entirely lying." Barrett's head whipped back around to face his wife, his jaw slack with disbelief. Chloe stared, her tirade cut short, confusion clouding her features. The entire party held its breath. Jocelyn looked at Chloe, her eyes devoid of hatred. Instead, she offered a look of something akin to pity. "He did rent an apartment for you in the West Village, Suite 14B on Charles Street. He did take you to Mustique for your birthday in April while telling me he was closing a deal in Singapore. And he did tell you he loved you. Barrett is very generous with his words when he wants something." The level of detail was stunning. Jocelyn could feel Barrett's entire body go rigid with shock. He was staring at her as if he'd never seen her before, in a way he hadn't. "How?" he croaked. She ignored him, keeping her attention on the stunned guests and the very confused mistress. "And you are indeed pregnant," she continued, her voice smooth as silk. "About 16 weeks, I believe. Congratulations. Barrett and I are so very excited about additions to the family." The sarcasm was subtle, but it landed like a precision-guided missile. Then Jocelyn turned her attention fully to her husband. The serene mask fell away, replaced by a gaze as cold and hard as a diamond. "But this is where the story gets interesting," she said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing everyone in. "Because while Barrett was making promises in your little love nest, he was being careless. And while you," she said, glancing at Chloe, "were planning your future with a married man, you made one fatal miscalculation." She let the silence hang in the air for a beat, savoring the moment of absolute power. The helicopter was still hovering, forgotten. The pink and blue decorations seemed absurd now, relics of a reality that no longer existed. "You both," Jocelyn said, her eyes sweeping over Barrett and Chloe, "underestimated me." She gave a slight nod. It was a prearranged signal. From the edge of the crowd, two figures began to move forward. Not security, not party planners. One was Eleanor Vance, her lawyer, her leather briefcase in hand. The other was a burly, stern-looking man, a professional process server. They walked calmly, purposefully up to the platform. Barrett watched them approach, his face a canvas of dawning horror. He finally understood. This wasn't an interruption of his wife's party. This was her party. Barrett asked her. Eleanor said, her voice crisp and professional. "This is for you." The process server handed a thick sheaf of documents to Barrett. His hands trembled as he took them. "What is this?" he whispered, though he already knew. Jocelyn smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. It was a smile of victory, of liberation, of glorious, righteous vengeance. "That, my love," she announced, her voice ringing out for all to hear, "is a petition for divorce on the grounds of adultery. It's filed along with a motion to freeze all your personal and corporate assets pending a forensic audit. An audit, by the way, that's already been completed." She turned to Chloe, whose face had gone from triumphant to utterly bewildered. "And as for your baby," Jocelyn said, her voice softening just a fraction, "I hope for his sake he looks like you, because he won't be seeing a single dollar of the Astor fortune. You see, a month ago, in light of Barrett's extracurricular activities, I had him sign an updated post-nuptial agreement." Jocelyn looked back at her husband, whose face had crumpled in utter defeat as he stared at the papers in his hand. "An agreement that contains a rather stringent infidelity clause, one that renders our original prenup null and void and awards me 70% of all marital assets. It also disinherits any and all issue conceived outside of our marriage. I believe your lawyer Marcus has a copy. I had Eleanor send it to him this morning. I do hope you read the fine print, darling." The helicopter, its pilot, finally getting a signal from the ground crew, chose that exact moment to act. A huge billowing cloud erupted from its underbelly, spreading across the sky. It wasn't pink, it wasn't blue. It was a brilliant, triumphant, and utterly unapologetic cloud of gold. The crowd gasped. It was a statement so bold, so audacious, it was breathtaking. Gold. The color of money. The color of victory. Her victory. Jocelyn leaned into the microphone one last time. "It seems there's been a change of plans," she said, her voice echoing across the lawn. "The gender of my baby is a private matter for my family. But today we are revealing something far more important. My independence." And with that she turned, took Eleanor's arm, and walked off the platform, leaving her husband financially and socially ruined, standing next to his pregnant mistress amidst the wreckage of the perfect life he thought he controlled. The show was over, and she had been the star. Her exit was not a retreat. It was a victory lap. As Jocelyn and Eleanor walked away from the platform, a path cleared for them as if by royal decree. The gawking, gossiping assembly of New York's elite parted their faces, a mixture of shock, admiration, and fear. She was no longer just Barrett Astor's pretty wife. She was a force of nature, a woman who had just publicly executed her own king. She could feel their reassessment of her in the shifting atmosphere. She had become legendary in the span of 5 minutes. Amelia rushed to her side, her face pale but her eyes shining with fierce pride. "Bella, my God," she breathed, grabbing Jocelyn's free hand. I have no words. That was biblical." "I told you the show was almost over," Jocelyn replied, a genuine smile finally touching her lips. It felt strange, like using a muscle that had atrophied. "Now comes the paperwork." Eleanor Vance, her stoic, brilliant lawyer, gave a thin, approving smile. "The paperwork is the best part, Jocelyn. It's the codification of his demise." They didn't flee the scene. That would have seemed weak. Instead, they moved with purpose towards the main house, the grand stone manor that had been her beautiful prison. From the corner of her eye, Jocelyn saw the aftermath on the lawn. Barrett stood as if petrified, the divorce papers dangling from his hand like a white flag of surrender. Chloe Jenkins had sunk to the manicured grass, her crimson dress pooling around her, her face buried in her hands. The public declaration she had hoped would be her triumph had made her a pariah. She had come to claim a king, only to find herself tied to a court jester in the middle of his own dethroning. Marcus Thorne had finally reached Barrett, his face a thunderous mask of fury and disbelief. Jocelyn could imagine their conversation. "How could you be so stupid, Barrett? How could you sign that post-nup?" The truth was, Barrett's arrogance had been her greatest weapon. The post-nup signing had been a work of art. She had presented it to him not as a weapon, but as an act of faith. It was 3 weeks after she confirmed Chloe's pregnancy. She had staged a romantic dinner, told him she'd been feeling insecure about their future, about the baby changing things. She'd cried beautifully and convincingly. "I know how powerful you are, Barrett," she'd whispered, her head on his chest. "I just want to feel safe. I want to know that no matter what, you'll always choose me, that you'll always choose our family." She'd framed the infidelity clause as a testament to his fidelity. "Let's sign this," she'd said, "to prove to the world and to ourselves that we are unbreakable." He had eaten it up. His ego, so vast and insatiable, saw it as the ultimate tribute. His loyal, loving wife was so devoted she wanted to legally bind them together against a hypothetical threat. He was at that very moment embodying. He'd signed it without even letting Marcus review it properly, so eager was he to play the role of the magnanimous, trustworthy husband. He thought it was a love letter. It was a suicide note. As they entered the cool, marble-floored foyer of the house, Jocelyn's personal staff was already moving with quiet efficiency. Her head of security, a former Mossad agent named David, met them at the door. He was on her payroll, not Barrett's. "Mrs. Astor," he said with a respectful nod, "your car is ready. Your bags are already in it. The security detail is in place." "Thank you, David," she said. "Mr. Astor will be detained here for a while. Please ensure he and his guest—" She let the word hang in the air. "Do not leave the premises until I have cleared the area. And please relieve him of his phone." David's lips twitched. "With pleasure, ma'am." Everything was moving according to the intricate timeline Eleanor and Jocelyn had mapped out over weeks of clandestine meetings in Eleanor's Midtown office. While Barrett thought his wife was at prenatal yoga or meeting with interior designers for the nursery, she was plotting his downfall with the precision of a military general. They had discovered so much more than just an affair. The forensic accountant she'd hired, a genius recluse who could find a hidden dollar in the Vatican's coffers, had uncovered a labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore accounts. Barrett wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was preparing to cheat her in a divorce, hiding assets in anticipation of a future split. He was planning to leave her with the scraps of his empire. The irony was poetic. The post-nup he had so foolishly signed now gave her claim to a significant portion of those very assets he had tried to hide. His attempts to defraud her would now bankrupt him. Upstairs in the master suite that overlooked the now chaotic party, 2 trusted housekeepers were packing the last of her things. Not the lavish gowns or the jewelry Barrett had bought her. Those were material possessions she could leave behind without a second thought. They were packing the things that mattered: photo albums of her own family, her grandfather's collection of first edition books, her law degree framed in simple black wood, the pieces of Jocelyn Wren that existed long before Jocelyn Astor was ever invented. Amelia sat on the edge of the vast canopied bed, looking around the opulent room. "So, this is it. You're just leaving." "This was never my home, Ames," Jocelyn said, running a hand over the smooth, cool wood of her jewelry box where she kept her grandmother's simple gold locket. "It was a stage. The play is over. It's time to strike the set." She opened the box, took out the locket, and fastened it around her neck. It felt warmer and more valuable than the mountain of Astor diamonds she was leaving behind. Eleanor cleared her throat from the doorway. "Jocelyn, the markets are closed now, but the moment they open Monday, we file the injunction. The news of this," she gestured vaguely towards the window, "will hit the financial press by morning. His company's stock will plummet. The board of directors, many of whom are down there, will be forced to call an emergency meeting. With his assets frozen and this public scandal, his position as CEO will be untenable." This was the final brutal checkmate. Jocelyn wasn't just divorcing him. She was professionally and financially castrating him. His power was derived from his reputation and his wealth. By sunset, his reputation was in ashes. By Monday morning, his wealth would be paralyzed. A commotion from downstairs drew their attention. Muffled, enraged shouting. It was Barrett's voice. "He's realized he can't call his brokers," Eleanor said with grim satisfaction. "David is efficient." Jocelyn felt a strange sense of detachment. The man screaming downstairs was a stranger to her now. Her love for him had died a slow, painful death over the last few months, and its final breath had been exhaled the moment she saw the proof of Chloe's pregnancy. All that was left was the cold, hard resolve to protect herself and her child. "There's one last thing," Jocelyn said, turning to Eleanor. From her handbag, she pulled out a plain white envelope. It wasn't a legal document. It was personal. "Could you see that Miss Jenkins gets this?" she asked. "Discreetly, after we've gone." Eleanor took the envelope, her curiosity piqued. "May I ask what it is?" "It's a copy of a report," Jocelyn said, "and a recommendation." Inside the envelope was a printout of Mr. Harding's file on Barrett's other indiscretions. Chloe wasn't the first. She wasn't even the second or third. She was just the latest in a long line of young, impressionable women he had wooed with the same promises, the same lies, the same rented apartments. The report included details of 2 other overlapping affairs, one with a yoga instructor and another with the wife of one of his business partners. Also inside was the card of a top-tier palimony lawyer and a handwritten note from Jocelyn. "Chloe," it read, "he was never going to leave me for you. He was never going to leave me for anyone. He doesn't build partnerships. He acquires assets. You and your child deserve better than his lies. The enclosed report might give you some perspective. The lawyer's card might give you a future. Your fight is not with me. It never was. Good luck. I.A." It wasn't an act of kindness, not really. It was a strategic move. Arming Chloe with this information would ensure she would direct her righteous anger where it truly belonged, at Barrett. She would become another legal battle. He would have to fight another drain on his resources and his spirit. It was Jocelyn's final parting gift to him, a hornet's nest delivered by messenger. "You Jocelyn Astor," Amelia said, shaking her head in wonder, "are playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers." "Barrett taught me the value of thinking 10 moves ahead," Jocelyn replied quietly. "He just never imagined I'd be playing against him." With a final look around the room that held so many hollow memories, she walked out. She descended the grand sweeping staircase, her back straight, her head held high. She didn't look towards the sounds of Barrett's pathetic rage. She didn't look out at the wilting party. She looked straight ahead towards the massive oak doors that led to her freedom. As she stepped out into the late afternoon air, the golden smoke from the helicopter had dissipated, leaving behind a clear blue sky. It felt like a promise, a new beginning. The gilded cage was behind her, its bars broken, its master roaring in his self-made prison. She got into the back of the waiting black sedan. The engine purred to life, and the car pulled smoothly down the long gravel driveway, leaving the Astor estate and all its drama in the rearview mirror. Jocelyn didn't look back. There was nothing there for her anymore. Her phone, which had been silent all day on her orders, buzzed in her purse. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. "An interesting day at the office. Well played. Your father would be proud." M.T. Marcus Thorne, Barrett's lawyer. A shark he might be, but he was also a pragmatist. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. He was already hedging his bets, subtly signaling a potential allegiance. The rats were deserting the ship before it had even taken on water. Jocelyn deleted the message. She didn't need allies like him. She had herself, her child, and a fortune built on the ashes of her husband's arrogance. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt truly, completely, gloriously free. The real work was just beginning, but the war, the one that mattered, was already won. The silence that greeted Jocelyn in the Carlisle penthouse was more profound than any noise. It was a thick, weighted silence, the kind that follows a detonation where the air itself seems to be holding its breath. Down below, miles away on the manicured lawns of the Astor estate, her old life was imploding in a cacophony of sirens, shattered champagne flutes, and frantic phone calls. But up here, 30 stories above the city, surrounded by the hushed, old-world elegance of silk wallpaper and polished mahogany, there was only the soft hum of the metropolis and the steady, reassuring beat of her own heart. For the first hour she did nothing. She simply stood by the vast window overlooking Central Park, her hands cradling her belly, and breathed. She focused on the simple mechanics of it, in and out, as if relearning a forgotten skill. The adrenaline that had encased her in an armor of icy resolve for the past several hours began to recede, leaving behind a profound sense of exhaustion that was bone deep. It was the exhaustion of a soldier after the war is finally truly won. The fight was over. Now she had to learn to navigate the terrain of the peace she had scorched the earth to achieve. Slowly she moved through the suite. Her first act was to shed the costume. The cream organza dress, a symbol of a life that no longer existed, was unzipped and left to pool on the floor like a fallen cloud. In the marble bathroom, she washed the carefully applied makeup from her face, watching the serene mask of Mrs. Astor circle the drain. When she finally looked up, the reflection was just Jocelyn. Tired, pale, but with eyes that held a new, unyielding light. The baby kicked a sharp, insistent jab as if to say, "We're still here. We did it." A faint, watery smile touched her lips. Her phone, when she finally retrieved it from Amelia, was a useless, buzzing brick of frantic energy. She powered it off without looking at the screen and handed it back. "Let Eleanor's office filter everything," she instructed. "I don't want to hear from anyone but you and her." The world, however, would not be silenced. By morning, the story had gone from a society scandal to a global news event. The Golden Gender Reveal was the lead story on every major network, the top trending topic in a dozen countries. Jocelyn found she couldn't escape herself. On the televisions in the hotel lobby, her face was juxtaposed with Barrett's, hers, serene and resolute, his slack-jawed in disbelief. The public narrative fractured into two distinct streams. To some, she was a feminist icon, a calculating genius who had brilliantly checkmated a powerful, philandering man. Headlines screamed, "Astor's avenging angel and the woman who took the kingdom." To others, she was a cold, vengeful black widow, a woman whose cruelty was as breathtaking as her beauty. She was both a hero and a villain, depending on the byline. She found it all strangely irrelevant. "They're just writing fan fiction about a life they know nothing about," she told Amelia over tea, gesturing to a tablet displaying the competing narratives. "Let them. The only opinions that ever mattered in this were mine and now my child's." Eleanor arrived that first afternoon, a warrior returning with spoils. She was electric with the energy of the win. The board meeting was a masterclass in self-preservation. She reported, foregoing any preamble as she snapped open her briefcase. Marcus Thorne himself presented the motion to remove Barrett as CEO. He didn't hesitate, cited a crisis of confidence and irreparable reputational risk. I heard from a source that Barrett tried to appeal to them, reminded them of their decades of friendship, the golf trips, the favors. He was met with stony silence. The vote was unanimous. The very men who toasted his success yesterday cut him out like a tumor this morning. The brutality of it was breathtaking. Barrett had built his world on the idea of loyalty, but it was the loyalty of sharks who swim together only until one of them starts to bleed. He was bleeding now, and his oldest friends were the first to circle. A week later, Chloe Jenkins' lawsuit became the second front in Barrett's war of attrition. The filing, promptly leaked, was a masterwork of personal grievance and legal strategy, detailing not only Barrett's promises, but also the damning evidence of his other affairs. The yoga instructor, the business partner's wife. It painted a portrait not of a simple adulterer, but of a serial emotional predator. "That envelope you gave her," Amelia mused, looking up from the article. "You didn't just give her a weapon. You gave her a clear enemy and a righteous cause." I gave her the truth, Jocelyn corrected gently, her gaze distant. Her fight was never with me. It was with the man who lied to us both. Barrett built his life by keeping his victims in separate boxes, powerless and isolated. I simply gave her the keys to the other rooms. She felt a strange, detached vindication. This wasn't about alliance. It was about ensuring that all the consequences of Barrett's actions landed squarely on his own shoulders. He would not be allowed to frame this as a simple drama between two hysterical women. This was a multifaceted reckoning of his own meticulous creation. A few days after that, Jocelyn felt the first pangs of cabin fever. She needed air that wasn't filtered through a hotel ventilation system. Donning a simple dress, a wide-brimmed hat, and sunglasses, she slipped out of the Carlisle and into the anonymity of the city. She found a quiet bookstore on a side street, the air smelling of paper and dust. As she browsed the history section, she overheard two women a few feet away, their voices hushed but excited. "Can you believe it? She served him the papers at the party? And the gold smoke. The sheer audacity. My friend's cousin knows someone who was there, said you could have heard a pin drop. He deserved it, though. Men like that, they think they're gods." Jocelyn froze her hand, hovering over a biography of Catherine the Great. Her life story was now coffee shop gossip, whispered speculation between strangers. For a vertiginous moment, she felt like a ghost listening to a discussion of her own obituary. But then a sense of calm settled over her. The woman they were talking about, that audacious theatrical creature, felt like someone else. The real Jocelyn was here in a dusty bookstore, choosing a book, a quiet woman about to become a mother. She bought the biography and walked back to the hotel, the encounter solidifying a new resolve to live her life, not the public's version of it. That evening, looking at the fresh round of paparazzi photos Amelia found online, the conversation deepened. The images showed a haggard Barrett, his swagger replaced by the shuffling gait of a defeated man. "Do you remember," Amelia said softly, "in law school, Professor Albright said you had the most ruthless legal mind he'd seen in a decade. He said you'd be on the Supreme Court one day, and then you met Barrett and all that fire. It just got banked." Jocelyn looked at her friend. "It never went out, Ames. It was just waiting for fuel." "Well, he certainly gave you that," Amelia said with a wry smile. "Welcome back, Bella." The final act came on a crisp autumn afternoon, nearly 3 months after the party. Jocelyn was in the suite now, feeling more like a home, sketching out the charter for her new foundation when Eleanor called. The usual professional crispness in her lawyer's voice was underlaid with a current of pure, unadulterated triumph. "Jocelyn, the final audit is complete," she began. "The forensic team has been through everything with a fine-toothed comb. The offshore accounts in Nevis, the shell corporations registered in Delaware, the art he'd gifted to a holding company. We found it all. He was greedier and more reckless than we could have ever hoped." Jocelyn sat down heavily in an armchair, her hand resting on her stomach, the baby kicking gently as if sensing the gravity of the moment. "What's the bottom line, Eleanor?" There was a significant pause, the sound of a single important page being turned. "After we account for his legal fees, his inevitable settlement with Miss Jenkins, which his lawyers are scrambling to expedite, and his other outstanding corporate debts, Barrett Astor will be left with his personal effects and roughly 4% of his documented net worth. He'll avoid total bankruptcy, but he'll never be a player again. In the world he values, he is finished. He's been ejected from the game." "And on my side," Jocelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. The number Eleanor quoted was not just a number. It was a kingdom. It was generational security, unassailable power, and absolute freedom quantified. It was the price of her pain, and it was the foundation for her child's future. A wave of profound stillness washed over her. It wasn't the giddy joy of winning the lottery. It was the deep, grounding weight of finality. The last chain had just rusted into dust. It was truly, irrevocably over. That evening, she bundled herself in a cashmere coat and walked to Central Park. The setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the pathways, turning the riot of autumn leaves to fire and gold. The air was cold and clean, and she breathed it in deeply. She walked for a long time, her hand never leaving her belly, feeling the strong, steady living movements of her child within. The golden smoke at the party had started as an act of defiance, a bold theatrical symbol of the fortune she was claiming. But as she stood by the lake watching the last rays of sun glitter on the water's surface, she finally understood its deeper, more personal meaning. Gold is a noble metal. It is tested and purified by intense, unbearable fire. The heat burns away all the impurities, the dross, the weakness, until only the pure, strong, unyielding, and valuable element remains. She had been through the fire. The slow, corrosive burn of discovering Barrett's betrayal, the roaring inferno of the public confrontation. The lonely, smoldering night spent plotting a war while the world thought she was decorating a nursery. It had been a crucible designed to destroy her. Instead, it had burned away the woman she was pretending to be, the docile, decorative, accommodating wife. It had forged her into the woman she was always meant to be. Barrett had wanted to give their child a legacy of power, of excess, of a name that opened doors. He'd wanted to raise an heir to a hollow throne. But the fire had changed everything. Her child, her son, her daughter, would not be born into that cold, transactional world. They would be born into a world of quiet strength, of unshakable integrity, of earned respect. Their legacy wouldn't be the hollow Astor name, but the fierce, resilient Wren blood that ran through her veins. It would be a legacy built not on a launch pad to the moon, but on the solid ground of a mother who knew her own worth, a mother who had walked through hell and emerged not just intact, but golden. Jocelyn's story is a powerful reminder that the greatest strength is often forged in the deepest betrayal. She didn't just get mad, she got smart. She transformed her pain into a meticulously executed plan that reclaimed not only her fortune but her identity and her freedom. She took a situation meant to humiliate and destroy her and turned it into her ultimate victory. Her story proves that you should never ever underestimate a woman who has decided she is done being a victim. What do you think? Was her revenge justified? Was it brilliant, or was it too cold? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. A 7-month pregnant wife, a Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park, and a love story that magazines called a modern fairy tale. Yasmin Redford had it all. Her husband, tech billionaire Howard Redford, was the man who had everything, and he'd given it all to her. So when he told her he was flying to St. Bart's for a final solitary retreat before their baby arrived, she kissed him goodbye. But billionaires don't fly commercial, and when a private jet's manifest is leaked, secrets have nowhere to hide. Howard wasn't alone. He was with his mistress on a lavish baby moon celebrating a different baby. What he didn't know was that while he was sipping champagne at 40,000 feet, his pregnant wife was meeting with the most ruthless divorce attorney in New York. The divorce papers were already drafted. The courier was already booked, and paradise was about to become a prison. The city lights of Manhattan glittered below the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, a sprawling universe of captured stars. To Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford, they were just part of the wallpaper of her life, a life so meticulously curated for perfection, it felt at times like a museum exhibit. She was the primary installation, the beautiful, intelligent wife of Howard Redford, the boy wonder of the fintech world. At 33, Howard was a force of nature. He had the restless energy of a man who believed he could bend the world to his will, and the track record to prove it. His company, Nexus Capital, had revolutionized algorithmic trading, making him a billionaire before his 30th birthday. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp jaw eyes, the color of a stormy sea that held a perpetual spark of ambition, and a smile that could disarm world leaders and charm seasoned investors with equal ease. They had met at a charity gala 5 years prior. Yasmin, then a rising star in the art curation world, possessed a quiet grace and a formidable intellect that Howard found captivating. She wasn't just another socialite drawn to his flame. She challenged him, debated with him, and saw the man behind the myth. Her family, the Vanderbilts, were old money steeped in traditions, and a quiet, unshakable influence that made Howard's new money flashiness seem almost crude in comparison. Their union was a merger of dynasties, a storybook romance that graced the covers of Vogue and Forbes simultaneously. Their home was a testament to their combined aesthetics. Howard's sleek minimalist tech seamlessly integrated with Yasmin's priceless collection of contemporary art and antique furniture. It was a palace in the sky on the 78th floor of 157, a monument to their success, their power, their love. And now, at 29, Yasmin was 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son. The final piece of the perfect picture was about to be set in place. She ran a hand over the gentle, firm swell of her belly, a protective primal gesture that had become second nature. The baby kicked a fluttering reminder of the new life she was nurturing. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that rarely made it past the fortress of her public composure. "He's active tonight," she'd said an hour ago, hoping to draw Howard away from the holographic stock ticker glowing faintly in his home office. Howard had looked up, his focus slow to shift. "That's my boy, already planning his market takeover." He'd smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze was distant, his mind clearly still crunching numbers and closing deals a world away. This distance was a new thing, a subtle but persistent chill that had crept into their gilded cage over the past few months. At first, Yasmin had dismissed it as stress. Nexus Capital was in the middle of a massive global expansion, and Howard was pushing himself, as always, to the brink. There were more late nights at the office, more hushed phone calls taken in rooms he'd just exited, more weekends consumed by emergency board meetings. "It's the final push, darling," he'd assured her, stroking her hair, as she lay beside him in their cavernous bed. "Once the Asia deal is closed, it's just you and me and the little guy. I promise." Yasmin, wanting to believe him, had accepted it. She was a supportive wife, the anchor to his stratospheric ambition. But a thread of unease had been pulled, and now she couldn't stop it from unraveling the tapestry of their perfect life. The real shift, the one that planted a seed of cold dread in her heart, had a name: Chloe Sterling. Chloe was Howard's new protege, a 25-year-old coding prodigy from MIT. She was brilliant, beautiful, and possessed an ambition that mirrored Howard's own. He spoke of her with a reverence that bordered on obsessive. "She sees the market in a way no one else does," he'd say. "She's the future of the company." Yasmin had met her once at a company dinner. Chloe was a whirlwind of youthful energy with wide, doe-like eyes and a cascade of raven hair. She hung on Howard's every word, her hand brushing his arm a little too often, her laughter a little too loud, a little too intimate. Yasmin, a connoisseur of social subtleties, had recognized the performance instantly. It was the calculated, hungry ambition of a predator disguised as hero worship. She had felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. When she had gently mentioned to Howard that Chloe's professional admiration seemed to blur boundaries, he had become uncharacteristically defensive. "Don't be ridiculous, Yasmin," he'd snapped, his voice sharp. "You're being insecure. She's a kid. She's vital to the company. I can't have you making my top talent feel uncomfortable because you're feeling hormonal." The word hung in the air between them, ugly and dismissive. Hormonal. He had never spoken to her like that before. It was a dismissal not just of her concern, but of her perception of her very reality. The argument had escalated their first real venomous fight. They had reconciled, of course, with Howard, apologizing profusely, blaming his stress, and buying her a breathtaking diamond bracelet from Harry Winston as a peace offering. She wore it now, its cold weight a constant glittering reminder of that crack in their foundation. Tonight the unease was a physical presence in the silent penthouse. Howard was packing. He had announced it 2 days ago. "I need a break before the baby comes," he'd said, avoiding her eyes as he stared out at the city. "Just a few days to clear my head. I've booked a trip. St. Bart's. Just me. I need to disconnect to come back ready to be a father." Yasmin's heart had constricted. St. Bart's was their place. It was where he had proposed on the pristine white sands of Saline Beach. The thought of him there alone felt wrong, a desecration of a shared memory. Why alone? Howard, she had asked, her voice quiet. We could go together. A baby moon. Most couples do that. You can't fly, Yasmin. He'd replied quickly, a little too quickly. Doctor's orders. It's too close to your due date. It's not safe. She knew he was right about the flying restrictions, but the excuse felt hollow, a prepackaged, convenient truth. Still, she had relented. To fight him on it would only push him further away, would only validate his accusation of her being insecure and controlling. So she had smiled, helped him choose what to pack, and pretended to be the understanding, supportive wife. Now she stood in the doorway of their enormous walk-in closet, a space larger than most Manhattan apartments. Howard was carefully folding a lightweight linen shirt into his designer suitcase. He was packing for warm weather, for relaxation, for paradise. But as he reached into the back of his drawer, he palmed a small, unfamiliar box, and thinking she wasn't looking, slipped it into the side pocket of his carry-on. It wasn't a watch box or a cufflink box. It was smaller, more delicate. The size of a box for a woman's necklace, or perhaps a ring. Yasmin's blood ran cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She said nothing. She simply watched her mind, a maelstrom of denial and terrifying certainty. He was going to St. Bart's, their special place, but he was not going alone. And he was bringing a gift. She retreated silently from the doorway, her hand protectively on her belly. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing his mother's distress. In the reflection of the vast dark window, Yasmin saw herself, a woman standing on the precipice of a great fall, the glittering city lights behind her no longer looking like stars, but like the cold, indifferent eyes of a world that was about to watch her perfect life shatter into a million pieces. The gilded cage had become a trap, and she was just beginning to realize the door had been locked from the outside. The kiss Howard gave her at the door was as fleeting as it was cold, a ghost of a touch against her cheek. "I'll call you when I land, darling," he said, the endearment sounding rehearsed. "I love you." "I love you too," Yasmin whispered the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. She watched the elevator doors slide shut, encasing him in polished brass, and the finality of it felt like a guillotine's drop. The silence he left behind was immense, a roaring vacuum where the hum of his presence used to be. For an hour, she did nothing. She simply stood in the grand foyer, her hand resting on a cool marble console table, her mind refusing to process the implications of the little box and the distant look in her husband's eyes. Denial was a warm, comforting blanket, and she wanted to wrap herself in it to sleep until he came back and proved her fears were nothing more than the paranoid fantasies of a hormonal pregnant woman. But Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford was not a woman who wallowed in denial for long. Her breeding, her education, her very nature were rooted in analysis and action. She had managed art galleries, negotiated with ruthless collectors, and navigated the treacherous social waters of New York's elite. She was a strategist. With a newfound icy resolve, she walked into Howard's home office. The room was his sanctuary, a temple of chrome and black leather. His primary desktop computer was locked, protected by a password so complex it was likely a string of code. But Howard was a creature of habit, and in his arrogance, convenience often trumped security. His personal laptop sat on the corner of the desk, still logged in. Her hands trembled as she moved the mouse. The screen flickered to life, showing a half-finished email to his legal team about the Asia expansion. Her guilt was a sharp stabbing pain, but her suspicion was a roaring fire that consumed it. Where to even begin his emails? His calendar. She started with his browser history. Her eyes scanned the list, mostly financial news sites, tech blogs, and links to Nexus Capital's internal servers. Then she saw it. A series of searches from the past week, all centered around St. Bart's. Best private villas. St. Bart's, chef-catered meals. St. Bart's, jewelry stores. Gustavia Cartier, Trinity, necklace price. and then the one that made her breath catch in her throat. St. Bart's. Medical Clinic. Obstetrics. Obstetrics. The word pulsed on the screen. Why would he be looking up pregnancy-related medical care in St. Bart's? He had told her she couldn't fly. The only possible reason was that he was going with someone else who was pregnant. The pieces slammed together in her mind with brutal, sickening force. The distant behavior, the constant talk of his brilliant protégé. Chloe. The late nights weren't about work. They were about her. The hushed calls weren't to his board. They were to his mistress. The little box wasn't for a future surprise for Yasmin. It was a Cartier necklace for the other woman he had gotten pregnant. The baby moon he was taking wasn't to prepare for fatherhood with his wife. It was to celebrate a new family he was starting with his employee. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself, a low, wounded sound escaping her lips. The betrayal was absolute, a multi-layered act of cruelty so profound it was almost elegant in its depravity. He wasn't just cheating. He was replacing her. He was taking their special place, their baby moon, their future, and giving it to someone else. Her grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. The life she had built, the man she loved, the future she was carrying in her womb, it was all a lie. A meticulously constructed, beautifully presented lie. But then through the fog of pain, a different feeling began to surface. It started as a spark in the pit of her stomach and grew into a wildfire of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the fury of a woman scorned, yes. But more than that, it was the protective rage of a mother. This man, her husband, was not just betraying her. He was betraying their unborn son. He was creating a world of chaos and deception for his child before he even took his first breath. Yasmin wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her expression hardening. She was not a victim to be pitied. She was a Vanderbilt. She was a Redford, and she would not be erased. She returned to the laptop, her movements now precise and clinical. She needed more than just suspicion. She needed undeniable proof. She navigated to a travel folder she knew he kept. It was filled with itineraries from his past business trips. And there it was. A new file created 2 weeks ago. SBH Retreat. She clicked it open. The confirmation was for a 7-night stay at the Elysian Villas, the most exclusive and private resort on the island, a place so luxurious it made their usual 5-star haunts look common. The booking was for the Villa Serafina, a secluded 3-bedroom compound with a private beach, a full staff, and an infinity pool that melted into the Caribbean Sea. And then she saw the flight details. A private Gulfstream G650 chartered from a discreet aviation firm. Her eyes scanned the passenger manifest. 2 names, Howard Redford, Chloe Sterling. There it was, the black and white indisputable proof. Her heart didn't break this time. It turned to stone. She saved a copy of the entire itinerary to a hidden file on a secure cloud server she had maintained since her gallery days. She photographed the screen with her phone. Evidence. She thought about what to do next. Call him, confront him when he returned. The thought of a screaming match, of his inevitable gaslighting and false apologies, filled her with disgust. It was beneath her. It was unproductive. A messy emotional confrontation was what he would expect. He would use her pregnancy, her hormones, against her. He would try to manage the situation to control the narrative just as he controlled everything else. No, she would not give him that satisfaction. She would not play his game. She would invent a new one with new rules. Her mind went to her prenuptial agreement. At the time, it had felt like a formality, a distasteful but necessary piece of paperwork for a man of Howard's wealth. Her own family lawyer had insisted on certain clauses. Clauses Yasmin had barely paid attention to. She remembered one specifically, an infidelity clause. It was ironclad. In the event of proven adultery, the division of assets shifted dramatically in her favor. Her lawyer, a shrewd old man named Samuel Blackwood, had called it the Apocalypse Clause. At the time, she had laughed. Now it was her weapon. But Samuel was a family friend, gentle and diplomatic. She needed more than that. She needed a warrior. She needed someone who would not just handle a divorce, but orchestrate a takedown. There was only one name that came to mind. A name whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in the elite circles of New York. Eleanor Vance. Vance wasn't just a lawyer. She was a legend, a titan of matrimonial law who had dismantled the empires of some of the most powerful men in the country. She was brilliant, ruthless, and devastatingly expensive. She took on only a handful of cases a year, and she never lost. Yasmin stood up, her back straight, her resolve absolute. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Howard thought he was in paradise, celebrating his new life. He had no idea he was flying into the eye of a hurricane named Yasmin. She picked up her phone not to call her husband, but to make the most important call of her life. She found the number for Eleanor Vance's private office. As the phone began to ring, she looked out the window again. The city lights no longer seemed indifferent. They seemed like an army waiting for her command. Eleanor Vance's office. A crisp voice answered. "My name is Yasmin Redford," she said, her voice steady and clear, devoid of any tremble. "I need to schedule an immediate and confidential consultation with Ms. Vance. It's a matter of some urgency." The game was on. The offices of Vance and Associates were located in the Seagram building on Park Avenue, a masterpiece of corporate modernism that projected an aura of untouchable power. The interior was surprisingly serene, decorated in muted tones of gray cream and slate. It was a place designed to calm frayed nerves and focus the mind on the cold, hard calculus of divorce. Yasmin was led into a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. Eleanor Vance rose from behind a large, imposing desk made of polished obsidian. She was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored Armani suit. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp geometric bob, and her eyes, behind a pair of severe-looking glasses, were the color of chips of ice. They missed nothing. "Mrs. Redford," she said, her voice a low, modulated instrument of command. She didn't offer a handshake, but gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Thank you for coming in. Your call was compelling." Yasmin sat, placing her crocodile Hermes bag beside her. She felt a strange sense of calm. In this room with this woman, her chaotic emotions were liabilities. Only facts mattered. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Ms. Vance. Please, call me Eleanor. In my experience, urgency of this nature means the stakes are high. So tell me, Yasmin, why are you here?" Without preamble, Yasmin laid out the story. She spoke with a detached precision that belied the raw wound in her soul. She detailed Howard's recent behavior, the discovery of his secret relationship with Chloe Sterling, the damning evidence on his laptop, the resort booking the private jet, manifest the search history for prenatal care and Cartier necklaces. She spoke of their assets, the penthouse, the art collection, the shares in Nexus Capital, held in her name as part of their marital agreement. She concluded by mentioning the infidelity clause in her prenup. Throughout her account, Eleanor Vance was perfectly still. She didn't take notes. She simply listened, her icy gaze fixed on Yasmin's face, absorbing every detail, every nuance. When Yasmin finished, a long silence stretched between them. Finally, Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "And your husband is at this moment at the Elysian Villas in St. Bart's with his pregnant mistress." "That is correct," Yasmin confirmed. "He believes you are at home awaiting his return, none the wiser." "Yes." Eleanor's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It was not a smile of warmth, but of appreciation for a particularly interesting strategic problem. "Good," she said softly. "The element of surprise is our greatest asset. Most women in your position would have called him screaming. They would have given him time to hide assets, to create a counter-narrative, to prepare for war. You did not. That tells me you are not most women." Yasmin felt a flicker of pride. "I have no intention of letting him control this." "Excellent," Eleanor said, her voice gaining a steely edge. Because we are not going to file for divorce in the traditional way. A quiet filing gives him time to react to move his money through the labyrinthine shell corporations men like your husband are so fond of. No, we are going to execute what I like to call a decapitation strike. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to Yasmin as she surveyed the city below. We will file a petition for dissolution of marriage with the New York Supreme Court first thing tomorrow morning. Simultaneously, we will file an ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order. This is key. We will ask the judge to freeze every known asset: bank accounts, brokerage accounts, credit cards, property titles, personal and corporate. We will argue that there is a significant risk of dissipation of marital assets. A fancy way of saying your billionaire husband is about to hide his money now that he's been caught. Given that he is currently out of the country with his paramour, on whom he is clearly spending lavishly, the judge will almost certainly grant it. Yasmin listened, captivated by the cold, brutal efficiency of the plan. Eleanor turned back to face her. The order once signed by the judge will be transmitted electronically to every financial institution. By midday tomorrow, Howard Redford will be a billionaire on paper, but he won't be able to buy a cup of coffee. His corporate accounts at Nexus Capital will be frozen. Payroll, vendor payments, everything. The company will be paralyzed. This will force him to the negotiating table immediately and on our terms. The scale of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a corporate siege. He'll be furious, Yasmin breathed. That is the point, Eleanor replied. A furious man makes mistakes. A panicked man gives concessions. We want him shocked, stranded, and powerless. Which brings me to the delivery. She returned to her desk and fixed Yasmin with an intense look. We will not have a grubby process server from the city accost him. This needs to be a moment of maximum psychological impact. We will hire a high-end international courier service. A professional in a suit will arrive at his private villa in paradise. They will hand-deliver a package containing the summons, the divorce petition, and a copy of the judge's freezing order. He will be sunning himself with his mistress one moment and financially castrated the next. A vision flashed in Yasmin's mind. Howard poolside, his confident smile dissolving into disbelief and horror. The satisfaction was a dark, heady poison. There is one more thing, Eleanor continued, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. I want you to write him a note. A short one, to be included in the package. Nothing emotional, nothing angry, just a simple, clear message that this is your decision. It's important that the final blow comes from you. The next 24 hours were a blur of focused activity. Yasmin worked tirelessly with Eleanor's team of forensic accountants and legal aides. She provided them with every piece of financial information she had. Account numbers, she had memorized names of his private bankers, details of their property holdings in London and the Hamptons. She proved to be a formidable resource, her mind sharp and her memory for detail exact. Her years of managing multi-million-dollar art acquisitions had made her fluent in the language of money and assets. As the legal machinery churned, Yasmin felt a profound shift within herself. The grief, while still present, was packed away in a locked room in her heart. In its place was a cold, driving purpose. She was no longer just Yasmin Redford, the wife. She was a general commanding an army, moving pieces on a chessboard of immense consequence. She did it all while fielding Howard's daily calls from St. Bart's. "Hello, darling," he'd said on the first call, his voice breezy and warm. "The weather is incredible. You would love it. I wish you were here." "I wish I were there, too," she'd replied, her voice a perfect imitation of wistful longing. The ease with which she lied was terrifying, a skill she hadn't known she possessed. She was a performer, just like Chloe. "How are you feeling? How's the little guy?" "We're fine," she said, one hand on her belly. "Just missing you." Each lie was a small piece of her soul chipping away, but she held firm. She was protecting her son, building a firewall around their future. On the morning the papers were to be filed, Yasmin sat at her own desk, a delicate antique piece of furniture that stood in stark contrast to the brutal modernity of Howard's office. She took out a sheet of her personalized cream-colored stationery. Her handwriting, usually a graceful flowing script, was now tight and controlled. Eleanor had advised her to be concise. She thought for a long time, the pen hovering over the paper. What could she say to the man who was the love of her life and the architect of her greatest pain? In the end, she wrote only 2 sentences. 2 sentences that conveyed everything he needed to know. Howard, I know about Chloe. I know about the baby. Enjoy St. Bart's. Yasmin. She sealed the note in its matching envelope. It was the most civilized and yet the most savage thing she had ever done. Late that afternoon, Eleanor called. The judge has signed the order, she said, a note of triumph in her voice. The wire transfers to the banks are complete. The assets are frozen. The courier is on a flight to St. Martin and will take a private charter to St. Bart's. He will deliver the package to Villa Serafina tomorrow at noon local time. Yasmin hung up the phone. It was done. The storm she had gathered was about to make landfall. She walked over to the vast window and looked down at the city. Far below, a yellow taxi, impossibly small, navigated the canyons of steel and glass. She felt a kinship with it, a small but determined entity moving with purpose through a world of giants. Howard had once told her that in his business, timing was everything. You had to know the exact moment to strike to ensure maximum gain. It seemed she had learned his lessons well. Tomorrow at noon, in his sun-drenched paradise, Howard Redford would learn that his wife was a much better student than he had ever imagined. The Caribbean sun was a benevolent god casting a brilliant warm glow over the island of St. Bart's. In the exclusive enclave of the Elysian Villas, perched high on the cliffs overlooking Governor Beach Paradise, was a tangible reality. At Villa Serafina, the sound was of gentle waves kissing a private stretch of sand, the clinking of ice in crystal glasses, and the soft, satisfied laughter of its 2 occupants. Howard Redford lay on a plush white sun lounger, a picture of contented masculinity. He had shed the tension of New York like a heavy coat. His skin was bronzed, his eyes shielded by designer sunglasses were closed in blissful repose. Beside him, Chloe Sterling glowed. Her pregnancy, just entering its 5th month, was a neat, compact bump under her stylish bikini. She ran a hand through her dark hair, her eyes sparkling with a triumphant light, as she gazed at the man beside her. "Isn't it perfect, Jules?" she murmured, leaning over to kiss his shoulder. "Just perfect. Almost perfect," he said, opening his eyes and smiling at her. He reached into the beach bag beside him and pulled out the small navy blue Cartier box. This might help. Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She opened the box to reveal the Trinity necklace, 3 intertwined bands of rose yellow and white gold. It was delicate, iconic, and impossibly expensive. "Oh, Howard," she breathed, her eyes welling with tears. "It's beautiful." "A symbol," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "For us. For our new beginning. A new family." He conveniently ignored the fact that he was still married, that he had a wife 7 months pregnant with his firstborn son in New York. In this sun-drenched bubble, that life that Yasmin felt a million miles away. Here with Chloe, he was reborn, unshackled from the weight of old money and tradition that Yasmin represented. Chloe was his future, a reflection of his own voracious ambition. As he fastened the necklace around her neck, a man appeared at the edge of the terrace. He was dressed not in resort wear, but in a lightweight gray business suit. He held a sleek leather portfolio. He was discreet, professional, and utterly out of place. Jean-Pierre, the villa's butler, followed a step behind him, looking flustered. "Monsieur Redford, my apologies." This gentleman insisted. "A delivery for you." Howard's brow furrowed in annoyance. "I'm not expecting anything." The courier stepped forward. "Mr. Howard Redford?" he asked, his accent vaguely European. "Yes." Howard answered, his tone clipped. "I have an urgent personal delivery for you from New York." He extended the thick document-sized envelope. It was heavy, official-looking. Howard sighed, taking the package. He assumed it was from his office, some tedious document the board needed him to sign. "Fine, thank you," he said dismissively, placing it on the table beside him, intending to ignore it. "Sir," the courier said, not moving, "my instructions are to wait until you have personally opened the package and acknowledged its contents." Howard shot him a look of pure irritation. The arrogance of it was astounding. "Instructions from whom?" "From the office of Eleanor Vance on behalf of your wife, Mrs. Yasmin Redford." The name hit Howard like a physical blow. Eleanor Vance. He knew that name. Every billionaire in New York knew that name. It was a name synonymous with ruin. And then on behalf of your wife, Yasmin. The blood drained from his face. The warm, benevolent sun suddenly felt cold and menacing. Chloe, sensing the drastic shift in his demeanor, sat up straight, her hand protectively on the new necklace. "Jules, what is it? Who is Eleanor Vance?" Howard didn't answer. His hands, suddenly clumsy, fumbled with the clasp of the envelope. He tore it open, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The first document he pulled out was a summons to the Supreme Court of the State of New York. The bold letters at the top screamed at him. Petition for dissolution of marriage. He stared at it, his mind refusing to comprehend the words. Divorce. Yasmin was divorcing him. How could she possibly know he had been so careful? His mind raced, trying to find a foothold in the crumbling reality. It had to be a bluff, a misunderstanding. But then he saw the next document. It was dozens of pages long. The motion for the temporary restraining order. He scanned the text, his eyes catching phrases that made his stomach clench. Irrefutable evidence of adultery. Significant risk of dissipation of marital assets. Commingling of funds for the purposes of extramarital activities. Attached to the back were the exhibits. Exhibit A. A copy of the flight manifest for the private jet with his name and Chloe Sterling's. Exhibit B. The reservation confirmation for the Villa Serafina. Exhibit C. A printout of his internet search history. He felt a profound, sickening sense of exposure. She knew everything. Chloe, now deeply alarmed, tried to read the papers over his shoulder. "Howard, what is going on?" He waved her away, his focus entirely on the final damning document. The judge's order. It was stamped signed. He read the operative paragraphs, and the world tilted on its axis. It is hereby ordered that all personal and corporate bank accounts, brokerage accounts, and lines of credit listed in Exhibit D, held in the name of Howard Redford and/or Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford, are hereby frozen. It is further ordered that all assets of Nexus Capital LLC are hereby frozen, pending a full accounting of marital funds. Frozen. All of it. The word echoed in the sudden ringing silence of his mind. He was sitting in a $50,000 a night villa, a billionaire on paper, and he suddenly didn't have a dollar to his name. His hand trembled as he reached for the last item in the envelope. It was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. Yasmin's stationery. He recognized her elegant, precise handwriting. He read the two short, devastating sentences. Howard, I know about Chloe. I know about the baby. Enjoy St. Bart's. Yasmin. It was the polite, calm civility of the note that shattered him completely. It wasn't the note of a hysterical, heartbroken woman. It was the note of an executioner. Cold. Final. Absolute. He dropped the papers which scattered across the sun-drenched stone. He lunged for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unlock it. He tried to open his banking app. A red banner flashed across the screen. Account access restricted by court order. He tried his corporate account. The same message. He tried his personal Centurion card. He pulled up the app. Card suspended. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized him. He was trapped. Stranded in paradise with his mistress with no access to the money that defined his entire existence. Nexus. Capital, his empire was paralyzed. Payroll was due next week for thousands of employees. His deals, his reputation, everything was about to implode. Howard Chloe's voice was sharp, panicked. She had picked up the divorce papers. She knows about the baby. What does this mean? Assets frozen? Howard didn't answer her. He was staring out at the impossibly blue sea, but he didn't see it. He saw only the calm, disappointed face of his wife. The wife he had underestimated. The wife he had dismissed as hormonal and insecure. The quiet, graceful woman who had just brought his entire world crashing down around him with nothing more than a pen and a phone call. The courier, who had been watching the scene unfold with professional detachment, finally spoke. "Mr. Redford, do you acknowledge receipt?" Howard slowly turned his head, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. He felt a primal scream building in his chest, a roar of fury at his own stupidity, at Yasmin's unexpected treachery. He had come to paradise to celebrate a new beginning, but he had walked directly into the meticulously planned end of his life as he knew it. And the worst part, the part that twisted in his gut like a knife, was the chilling finality of her note. "Enjoy St. Bart's." It wasn't just a farewell. It was a curse. The paradise of Villa Serafina transformed into a luxurious prison cell almost instantly. The serene bubble of sun, sea, and champagne popped, leaving behind the acrid smell of panic and recrimination. Howard's first instinct, the instinct of a man used to solving every problem with his checkbook, was to fight, to call his lawyers, his bankers, his board members. He stabbed at his phone, dialing his lead attorney at Nexus Capital. The call went to voicemail. He tried his personal wealth manager at Goldman Sachs. Voicemail. He soon realized the horrifying scope of Eleanor Vance's strategy. The court order wouldn't have just gone to the banks. It would have gone to his key personnel, advising them that all communication regarding financial matters was to be directed through Vance's office. He was cut off, isolated. Chloe, her initial shock curdling into fear, watched him pace the terrace like a caged tiger. The Cartier necklace felt like a cold weight on her skin, now no longer a trophy, but a brand. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How are we supposed to pay for this place? How are we getting home? Don't you think I'm trying to figure that out?" Howard snarled, turning on her. The charm he had cultivated was gone, stripped away to reveal the raw, desperate man beneath. "This is your fault. My fault." Chloe shot back, her doe eyes flashing with anger. "You're the one who was married. You told me she was fragile, that you were going to leave her after the baby was born. You said you had it all under control." "I did have it under control," he roared. "But I underestimated her. I underestimated what she was capable of." Their argument spiraled, the beautiful fantasy of their future dissolving into a bitter blame game. All the while, the sun continued to shine and the waves continued to crash, indifferent to the implosion of their affair. Back in New York, Yasmin was the picture of calm control. She sat with Eleanor Vance in the lawyer's obsidian-walled office, monitoring the fallout. Eleanor's phone had been ringing incessantly. Panicked calls from Nexus Capital's board members, from Howard's army of financial advisors, even from the charter jet company, demanding to know how they would be paid for the return flight from St. Bart's. Eleanor handled each call with surgical precision. "Mr. Redford's assets are under a court-ordered freeze," she would state calmly. "All inquiries are to be directed to my office in writing." "No, I cannot authorize any payments at this time. He's trapped." Yasmin said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "For now," Eleanor cautioned. "Men like your husband are cornered animals. He will get creative. He will find a line of credit call in a favor from someone off the books. Our goal wasn't to strand him forever, but to force his hand. He will have to negotiate. And when he does, he will be negotiating from a position of absolute weakness." The first twist came 2 days later. Howard, having exhausted all his official channels, made a desperate call to a man he knew from his early, hungrier days, a shadowy private equity magnate named Marcus Thorne, with a reputation for operating in the gray areas of international finance. Howard begged for a short-term high-interest loan, just enough to get home and mount a legal defense. Marcus Thorne agreed, but the price was steep. It wasn't just interest he wanted, it was information. He wanted inside knowledge of Nexus Capital's proprietary trading algorithms, the crown jewels of Howard's empire. Cornered and desperate, Howard agreed. What Howard didn't know was that Marcus Thorne had a silent partner in his equity firm, a partner who had been feeding him information about Howard for months, waiting for the perfect moment of vulnerability to strike. That partner was Yasmin's father, Harrison Vanderbilt. Harrison, a man of immense quiet power from the world of old money, had always distrusted Howard. He saw him as a flashy, arrogant upstart who didn't deserve his daughter. When Yasmin had come to him, not for help, but simply to inform him of her plan, he had put his own chess pieces in motion. He knew Howard's type. When cornered, he would turn to someone like Thorne. Harrison's investment in Thorne's firm gave him a listening post right inside Howard's desperate plea. The call was recorded, providing Eleanor with undeniable proof that Howard was attempting to sell off corporate secrets, which were also marital assets, in direct violation of the court order. Contempt of court. Eleanor set a predatory gleam in her eye as she listened to the recording. "This is beautiful. We can use this to strip him of his control over the company entirely. We can petition the judge to appoint an independent receiver to run Nexus Capital." The second, more personal twist came from Chloe Sterling herself. After 2 days of being trapped with a furious, broke Howard, the fantasy was well and truly over. She saw the man he was without his money, volatile, selfish, and weak. Using the villa's Wi-Fi, she did something she should have done months ago. She researched Eleanor Vance, and in her research she found articles about another of Vance's famous cases, a case involving a faked pregnancy and a fraudulent claim on a wealthy industrialist. A seed of an idea began to form. Chloe contacted Eleanor Vance's office, directly requesting a secret meeting. She claimed to have information that would be invaluable to Yasmin's case. Yasmin, against Eleanor's initial advice, agreed to a video call. She needed to see the woman who had tried to destroy her life. On the screen, Chloe looked pale and diminished, the confident glow completely gone. "Mrs. Redford." "Yasmin." She began, her voice shaky. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I am not the monster you think I am. Howard. He lied to me. He told me your marriage was over, a loveless arrangement. He said you were emotionally unstable. And you chose to believe him." Yasmin asked, her voice like ice. "I was a fool," Chloe admitted. "But I'm also pregnant with his child, and now he is ruined and I am trapped. I want to help you. In exchange for consideration." "What kind of consideration?" Eleanor cut in, her tone sharp. "A settlement," Chloe said, finding a sliver of her old confidence. "A trust fund for my child. And in return, I will testify that Howard was actively planning to defraud you. That this entire baby moon was a precursor to him hiding assets in offshore accounts under my name. I have emails. He was careless." Yasmin looked at the young woman on the screen. She saw the desperation, the calculated self-interest. It was a tempting offer. Chloe's testimony would cement their case and utterly ruin Howard, but something in Yasmin's gut told her to be cautious. Her motherly instinct was screaming. "Chloe," Yasmin said, her voice softening slightly. "Before we discuss any deals, I want one thing. A doctor in St. Bart's is going to come to your villa. He will perform an ultrasound. I want to see the image of my husband's child." Chloe's face froze. A flicker of pure panic shot through her eyes before she masked it. That's an invasion of my privacy." "It's a condition of any negotiation," Yasmin stated flatly. "No scan, no deal. You have 1 hour to agree." Yasmin ended the call. The silence in the room was thick with tension. "You think she's lying?" Eleanor asked. "I think," Yasmin said, her hand on her own very real kicking belly, "that a woman who is truly 5 months pregnant doesn't panic at the thought of an ultrasound." An hour later, the call came not from Chloe, but from a frantic Howard. Marcus Thorne had informed him that their deal was off, that Harrison Vanderbilt was involved, and that he was now facing contempt charges. He was broken. "Yasmin, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I'll do anything. I'll give you whatever you want. Just call this off. You've destroyed me." "You destroyed us, Howard," she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "You did this." As he continued to plead, an email dinged in Eleanor's inbox. It was from the international courier service they had used. The man who delivered the papers had submitted his final expense report. He noted that upon leaving the villa, he had passed the trash receptacle at the end of the long driveway. Sticking out of the top was the distinctive navy blue Cartier box. He had thought nothing of it, but in light of the high-profile nature of the case, decided to mention it. He also attached a photo from his phone. Eleanor opened the image and turned the screen toward Yasmin. It showed the empty Cartier box, but lying beside it in the trash was something else. A small silicone prosthetic. The kind used by actresses, or perhaps by a woman trying to convincingly fake a pregnancy bump. It was the final ugly piece of the puzzle. Chloe wasn't pregnant. She had never been pregnant. The search for obstetrics in St. Bart's wasn't for her care. It was likely Howard researching what a real 5-month pregnancy should look like. The entire affair, the baby, that was the foundation of their new life, was a complete and utter fraud, a scam designed to entrap a billionaire. And Howard, in his arrogance and ego, had fallen for it completely. Yasmin looked at the picture, then back at the city skyline. Her husband hadn't just betrayed her for another woman. He had betrayed her for a lie, a cheap, pathetic illusion. The rage and grief she had been holding back finally receded, replaced by a profound, almost pitiful sense of clarity. He wasn't a monster. He was a fool, and his empire was crumbling not because of a grand passion, but because of a grand deception he had been too blind to see. Her phone buzzed again. It was Howard calling for the 10th time. She silenced the call and looked at Eleanor. "It's over," Yasmin said. "Let's finish this." The end wasn't a fiery explosion, but the quiet, deliberate dismantling of a life. Armed with proof of Howard's attempted fraud and Chloe's deception, Yasmin held all the cards. The divorce settlement was not a negotiation, it was a surrender. Yasmin retained the Manhattan penthouse, the art collection, and a controlling interest in Nexus Capital as stipulated by the Apocalypse Clause in their prenup. She had the board install an interim CEO, a steady hand to guide the company out of the chaos Howard had created. Howard was left with a fraction of his former fortune and a reputation shattered beyond repair. Chloe Sterling vanished, last heard of boarding a flight to Dubai, the fake pregnancy and Cartier necklace, her only parting gifts from a life she almost had. Months later, Yasmin stood in the nursery of the penthouse. The room was bathed in the soft afternoon light, decorated in serene shades of cream and blue. In her arms, she held her son Daniel Vanderbilt Redford. He was small, perfect, and blessedly real. He had his father's stormy eyes, but Yasmin hoped he would have her strength, her perception. She looked out at the city, no longer a cage or a battlefield, but simply a view. It was the backdrop to her new life, a life she had seized from the wreckage of a lie. She was not just a wife or a mother. She was the architect of her own future, a matriarch in the making, proving that the deepest betrayals can sometimes forge the strongest survivors. Thank you for listening to this story of love, betrayal, and ultimate revenge. The story of Yasmin Redford reminds us that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. She turned her pain into power and rewrote her own ending. In the glittering world of New York's elite, where love is a commodity and secrets are currency, a fairy tale romance is about to be shattered. When a doting husband, a self-made millionaire, inexplicably cancels his pregnant wife's dream baby shower, he unknowingly ignites a firestorm of deception. His own mother, a woman with a will of iron and a heart of gold, steps in to right his wrongs. But in doing so, she unearths a betrayal so shocking it will tear their family apart. This isn't just a story about a canceled party. It's a tale of lies, manipulation, and the fierce, unyielding power of a mother's love. The September air in New York City carried the first crisp hint of autumn, a welcome reprieve from the sweltering summer. For Arabella Cartwright, however, the changing seasons were merely a backdrop to the blossoming new chapter of her own life. At 28, she was 7 months pregnant with her first child, a daughter, and married to a man who was by all accounts the city's most eligible bachelor, even after he was off the market. Remy Dunn was a name that echoed in the hallowed halls of Wall Street and graced the society pages with equal reverence. A tech mogul who had built his empire from the ground up. Remy was the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he owned it. Their love story was one for the modern age, a whirlwind romance that had culminated in a lavish wedding at the Plaza Hotel a year prior. Arabella, a curator at a boutique art gallery, had been swept off her feet by Remy's charm, his ambition, and the disarming vulnerability she occasionally glimpsed beneath his polished exterior. He had promised her the world, and for a time it seemed he had delivered it on a silver platter. Their sprawling penthouse on the Upper East Side with its panoramic views of Central Park was a testament to his success, a gilded cage she had willingly stepped into. The baby shower was meant to be the pinnacle of their pre-parental bliss. Arabella had envisioned an elegant affair, a sophisticated luncheon at the iconic Rainbow Room, a place that held sentimental value for her. It was where her own parents had celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, a memory she cherished. She wanted to be surrounded by the genuine warmth of her closest friends and family, a celebration of new life that was both intimate and grand. Remy had initially been enthusiastic, or so it seemed. "Whatever you want, my love," he'd said, kissing her forehead, as they reviewed the plans with their event planner, a formidable woman named Genevieve. "Only the best for my girls." He had insisted on footing the entire bill, a gesture that at the time Arabella had found endearing. The budget was astronomical, but Remy had brushed off her concerns with a wave of his hand. "It's a drop in the ocean, Arabella. Our daughter deserves the world." The invitations, exquisite creations of ivory cardstock with rose gold calligraphy, had been sent out weeks in advance. The menu was a carefully curated selection of delicacies, the floral arrangements a breathtaking cascade of peonies and hydrangeas. Everything was perfect, a fairy tale brought to life. The first crack in the pristine facade appeared on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks before the scheduled event. Arabella was arranging a bouquet of fresh lilies in the foyer when Remy walked in, his face a mask of strained composure. He was usually the epitome of calm, his movements measured and deliberate. But today there was a frantic energy about him, a nervous twitch in his jaw that she had never seen before. "We need to talk," he said, his voice clipped. He loosened his tie, a gesture that in anyone else might have signaled relaxation, but in Remy it was a red flag. "Of course," Arabella replied, her heart giving a nervous flutter. "Is everything all right at work?" He led her into the living room, the vast expanse of glass offering a stunning, almost surreal view of the city below. He didn't sit but paced in front of the fireplace, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his tailored trousers. "It's about the baby shower," he began, and Arabella's stomach clenched. "I'm afraid we have to cancel it." The words hung in the air, sharp and dissonant, like a shattered pane of glass. Arabella stared at him, convinced she had misheard. "Cancel it. Remy, what are you talking about? Everything is booked. The invitations are out." "I know, darling, and I'm so sorry," he said, finally stopping to look at her. But his eyes, usually a warm, reassuring brown, were distant, evasive. "Something's come up. A business deal, a massive one. It's happening in Singapore, and the timing it's just impossible. I have to be there." Arabella's mind reeled. A business deal? Important enough to cancel their daughter's baby shower. But can't you postpone the trip or go after the shower? "It's just one afternoon, Remy." "It's not that simple," he insisted, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "This has been in the works for months. The final negotiations are happening that same weekend. If I'm not there, the deal falls through. We're talking about a 9-figure acquisition, Arabella. It's crucial for the company." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging. It wasn't just about the party, the money, or the elaborate plans. It was about the gesture, the symbolism. It was about him choosing work over this milestone, over her, over their daughter. So that's it. You're just canceling it without even discussing it with me. I am discussing it with you, he said, his tone softening as he saw her distress. He moved to her side, wrapping his arms around her. But his embrace felt hollow, a perfunctory gesture rather than a comforting one. Listen, we'll do something else when I get back. Something even bigger, I promise. A welcome home party for the baby that will put this shower to shame. Arabella wanted to believe him, to find solace in his words. But a cold knot of doubt was forming in her gut. Something felt off, a discordant note in the carefully composed symphony of their life. His explanation was plausible, yes. Remy was a man driven by his work. But this felt different. It felt rehearsed. Over the next few days, a chilling sense of unease settled over her. Remy was apologetic, showering her with gifts, a diamond tennis bracelet, a limited edition handbag, as if to fill the void left by the canceled celebration. He made the calls himself to Genevieve, the event planner to the Rainbow Room. His voice a smooth, apologetic murmur as he dismantled the event piece by piece. He even drafted a carefully worded email to their guests, citing unforeseen and unavoidable business obligations. Arabella tried to push her suspicions aside, blaming them on pregnancy hormones, on her own disappointment. But the questions kept swirling in her mind. Why couldn't he have told her about this trip sooner? Why the sudden last-minute cancellation? And why, when she tried to talk about it, did he become so defensive, his answers so vague? The person who seemed most unfazed by the cancellation, much to Arabella's surprise, was her mother-in-law, Bellamy Dunn. Bellamy was a formidable woman, the matriarch of a family that had seen its share of ups and downs. A widow for over a decade, she had raised Remy on her own, instilling in him the fierce ambition that had propelled him to success. She was a woman of impeccable taste and unshakable resolve, her silver hair always perfectly coiffed, her designer suits a testament to her enduring elegance. Arabella had always had a good relationship with Bellamy, a respectful, if not overly close bond. She admired the older woman's strength, her sharp wit, and her unwavering devotion to her son. When Arabella called her to break the news about the baby shower, expecting sympathy, or perhaps even a stern word for Remy Bellamy's reaction, was surprisingly calm. "Men can be fools, my dear," she had said, her voice a soothing balm over the phone. "Especially when they have more money than sense. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. The most important thing is you and that precious baby girl." Arabella, desperate for an ally, had poured out her heart to her mother-in-law, voicing her doubts, her hurt, her nagging feeling that something was amiss. Bellamy listened patiently, her silence a comforting presence on the other end of the line. "Remy has always been intense about his work," Bellamy said carefully. "It's what's made him who he is. But you're right to be hurt, Arabella. A baby shower is a special moment, a rite of passage. It's not something to be cast aside for a business meeting, no matter how important." A few days later, Bellamy called Arabella with a proposition. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice imbued with a newfound energy, "and I refuse to let my granddaughter's arrival go uncelebrated. If Remy is too busy to throw you a party, then I will." Arabella was taken aback. "Bellamy, you don't have to do that. It's too much trouble." "Nonsense," Bellamy declared. "It would be my absolute pleasure. And we'll do it right. No stuffy luncheons or pretentious venues. We'll have it at my estate in the Hamptons. A beautiful garden party, relaxed and elegant. What do you say?" The offer was a lifeline, a glimmer of light in the darkness that had descended upon her. The Hamptons estate, a magnificent property that had been in the Dunn family for generations, was a place of happy memories for Arabella. She and Remy had spent a magical weekend there shortly after they started dating. I don't know what to say," Arabella stammered, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Say yes," Bellamy urged. "Let me do this for you, for my granddaughter, and we'll keep it a surprise for everyone. Let them think the celebration is off. It will be our little secret." The idea of a secret celebration, a quiet act of defiance against Remy's cold dismissal, appealed to Arabella's bruised heart. It was a chance to reclaim a piece of her stolen joy, to create a happy memory that was hers and hers alone. She agreed, her spirit lifting for the first time in weeks. Bellamy, true to her word, took charge with military precision. She was a whirlwind of activity, her calls and emails a flurry of arrangements. She hired a new event planner, a rising star named Isabel, who specialized in bespoke, intimate gatherings. The guest list was revised, pared down to their closest circle of friends and family, the ones who had offered genuine support and concern when they heard of the cancellation. As the days turned into weeks, Arabella found herself caught up in the excitement of the secret plan. She and Bellamy would have clandestine meetings at a quiet tea room on Madison Avenue, poring over fabric swatches and cake designs. Bellamy was a woman of impeccable taste. Her vision for the party, a perfect blend of sophistication and whimsy. She was creating a wonderland, a magical escape from the harsh realities of Arabella's life. But even as the new plans took shape, the shadow of Remy's deception loomed large. His trip to Singapore was fast approaching, and his behavior grew increasingly erratic. He was distant, preoccupied, his phone perpetually buzzing with calls and messages that he would take in another room, his voice a low, urgent murmur. When Arabella asked about the deal, his answers were evasive, couched in vague business jargon that meant nothing to her. The night before he was due to leave, Arabella tried one last time to break through the wall he had built around himself. They were lying in bed, the city lights twinkling like fallen stars outside their window. "I'm going to miss you," she said softly, tracing the outline of his jaw with her finger. "I'll miss you too." He replied, his voice thick with a strange, unreadable emotion. He pulled her closer, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "I'll be back before you know it, and I'll make this up to you, I swear." But his words, meant to be reassuring, only amplified the sense of dread that had taken root in her heart. She felt a sudden, visceral urge to tell him about Bellamy's party, to shatter the secret they were keeping from him. But something held her back. A primal instinct, a whisper of self-preservation that told her to keep this one thing for herself, to hold on to this small pocket of joy that was untainted by his lies. As she watched his plane ascend into the pre-dawn sky the next morning, a single tear traced a path down her cheek. It was a tear of sadness, of confusion, but also of a burgeoning strength she hadn't known she possessed. She was no longer just Remy Dunn's wife, a beautiful accessory to his successful life. She was a mother-to-be, a woman on the verge of a profound transformation. And she was about to discover that the fairy tale she had been living was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion, one that was about to come crashing down in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. The real drama, she was beginning to understand, had only just begun. The Blacktown car purred along the Long Island Expressway, leaving the relentless energy of Manhattan in its wake. Arabella stared out the window, the urban landscape gradually giving way to the manicured lawns and stately homes of the Hamptons. Beside her, Bellamy Dunn was the picture of serene confidence, her fingers tapping out a message on her phone, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "Isabel has outdone herself," Bellamy said, tucking her phone into her Chanel bag. "She just sent me a photo of the marquee." "It's breathtaking." Arabella managed a weak smile. "I can't thank you enough for this, Bellamy." "Really? Nonsense, dear. Family takes care of family. And today," she declared, her eyes twinkling with a mischievous light, "we celebrate." The Dunn estate, a sprawling shingle-style mansion overlooking the Atlantic, was even more beautiful than Arabella remembered. As they pulled up the long gravel driveway, she could see the marquee Bellamy had mentioned, a magnificent structure of white canvas and twinkling fairy lights, set up on the vast back lawn. The air was filled with the scent of salt and roses, and the distant sound of a string quartet warming up. It was everything Remy's party was meant to be, and yet it felt entirely different. There was a genuine warmth here, an intimacy that had been absent from the cold corporate grandeur of the Rainbow Room. Isabel, the event planner, a chic woman with a warm smile, greeted them at the door. "Everything is perfect, Mrs. Dunn," she said, her gaze shifting to Arabella. "Congratulations, you look absolutely radiant." Arabella, dressed in a flowing lavender gown that Bellamy had insisted on buying for her, felt a blush creep up her cheeks. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly beautiful, celebrated. The house was filled with their closest friends and family, Arabella's parents who had flown in from Connecticut, her sister Chloe, who had been her rock through the whole ordeal, and a small circle of friends who had known her long before she became Mrs. Remy Dunn. There were no society reporters here, no business associates of Remy's looking to network. Just love, genuine and unconditional. As her mother hugged her, tears in her eyes, Arabella felt a wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled her knees. This was what she had wanted all along. The afternoon unfolded like a dream. The sun shone brightly, the champagne flowed sparkling cider for Arabella, and the air was filled with laughter and happy chatter. Her friends showered her with thoughtful personal gifts, a stark contrast to the extravagant impersonal offerings that had likely been purchased by Remy's assistants for the original shower. But even in this idyllic setting, the architect of her recent misery was never far from her thoughts. Remy. Where was he now? In a sterile boardroom in Singapore, closing the deal of a lifetime. Did he feel even a pang of regret for what he was missing? The first discordant note in the day's perfect harmony came from her sister Chloe. She pulled Arabella aside near a fountain overflowing with white petals, her brow furrowed with concern. "Have you heard from Remy?" Chloe asked, her voice low. "He called from the airport yesterday," Arabella replied, "and he sent a text this morning saying he'd landed safely." "Why?" Chloe hesitated, biting her lip. "It's probably nothing, but my friend Sarah, the one who works for British Airways. She was working the first-class lounge at JFK yesterday morning." Arabella's heart, which had been feeling so light just moments before, began to thud heavily against her ribs. And she saw Remy. Chloe said, her eyes filled with apology. "He wasn't alone, Arabella. He was with a woman." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A woman. What did she look like? Arabella asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah said she was tall, blonde, very polished. Chloe struggled for the right words. She said they looked cozy. They were holding hands, Arabella, and she was sure it was the Singapore flight they were boarding. The blood drained from Arabella's face. A business trip. A 9-figure acquisition. The lies, so plausible, so carefully constructed, now seemed laughably transparent. The distant, preoccupied behavior, the hushed phone calls, the evasiveness, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Did she happen to catch the woman's name? Arabella asked, her voice trembling. Chloe shook her head. I'm so sorry, Ames. I didn't want to ruin your day, but I couldn't not tell you. Arabella felt a strange, chilling calm settle over her. The hurt was there, a raw, gaping wound in her chest. But beneath it was a cold, hard anger. He hadn't just canceled their baby shower. He had canceled it to go on a romantic getaway with another woman. He had lied to her, manipulated her, and made her feel like she was going crazy for doubting him. She excused herself, retreating to a secluded part of the garden that overlooked the ocean. The waves crashed against the shore, a relentless roaring rhythm that mirrored the turmoil in her soul. She took deep, shuddering breaths, her hands protectively cradling her belly. Her daughter. He had done this to their daughter, too. It was Bellamy who found her there, her face a mask of concern. Arabella. My dear, what is it? You look as if you've seen a ghost. The dam broke. The tears she had been holding back streamed down her face as she told her mother-in-law everything, Chloe's story. The woman at the airport. The sickening realization of Remy's betrayal. Bellamy listened in silence, her expression hardening with each word. The serene, elegant matriarch was gone, replaced by a woman of steel, her eyes blazing with a cold fury that startled Arabella. When Arabella had finished, her voice hoarse with sobs, Bellamy placed a comforting hand on her arm. But her voice when she spoke was laced with ice. That absolute fool, she seethed, her voice a low, dangerous growl. I knew something was wrong. I felt it in my bones. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with a speed that belied her age. There's a private investigator I've used in the past. For business matters. He's discreet, and he's the best. His name is David Chen. I'm hiring him. Now. What are you going to do? Arabella asked, wiping her eyes. I'm going to find out who this woman is, Bellamy said, her voice grim. And I'm going to find out exactly what my son is doing in Singapore. And then she looked at Arabella, her eyes softening for a moment. We are going to make him pay. The rest of the party passed in a blur for Arabella. She went through the motions, opening gifts, smiling for photos. But her mind was a million miles away, lost in a maelstrom of betrayal and heartbreak. Bellamy, however, was a master of deception. She returned to the party as if nothing had happened, her charm and grace unwavering. No one would have guessed the storm that was brewing beneath her placid surface. Later that evening, after the last guest had departed, Arabella sat with Bellamy and her own parents in the grand living room of the estate. The fire crackled in the hearth, a stark contrast to the chilling conversation that was taking place. Arabella had told her parents everything, and their shock had quickly turned to a protective rage. I'm going to kill him, her father, a gentle, unassuming man, had said, his voice shaking with anger. It was Bellamy who took control, her voice calm and measured. Anger is a luxury we can't afford right now, she said, her gaze steady. We need a plan. We need to be smart. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at the screen. That was David Chen. He's already on it. He has a contact at the airline. He's trying to get the passenger manifest for that flight. A few hours later, as Arabella was trying and failing to get some sleep in one of the lavish guest rooms, Bellamy knocked softly on her door. She was holding a tablet, her face grim in the soft glow of the screen. He got it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. David found her. She handed the tablet to Arabella. On the screen was a photo of the woman from the airport captured by CCTV footage that David had somehow managed to obtain. She was tall, blonde, and impeccably dressed, just as Chloe's friend had described. But it was the name on the file that made Arabella's blood run cold. Laura Vance. The name was sickeningly familiar. Laura Vance was a rival tech entrepreneur, a rising star in Silicon Valley, who had been making headlines for her aggressive business tactics and her stunning looks. She was Remy's direct competitor, their companies locked in a fierce battle for market share. Arabella had met her once at a charity gala. She remembered Laura's cool, appraising gaze, the way she had looked at Remy with an intimacy that had made Arabella uncomfortable even then. They're not in Singapore for a business deal, Arabella said, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with horrifying clarity. They're there, together. It gets worse, Bellamy said, her voice strained. She scrolled down the page, revealing hotel booking confirmations. They weren't staying in separate rooms in a business hotel. They were sharing a suite, the presidential suite at the Marina Bay Sands, one of the most romantic and luxurious hotels in the world. And David's preliminary financial investigation had revealed something even more shocking. Remy had recently transferred a significant amount of company stock, millions of dollars worth, into a private holding company. A company that was registered in the Cayman Islands. A company that listed Laura Vance as a majority shareholder. It wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal on a scale that Arabella could barely comprehend. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was potentially sabotaging his own company, the empire he had built from scratch. For what? For Laura Vance. What is he doing? Arabella whispered, her mind reeling from the sheer magnitude of his deception. Bellamy's face was a study in grim determination. I don't know, she said, but I intend to find out. And when Remy gets back from his little trip, he's not going to know what hit him. The beautiful sun-drenched day that had started with so much promise had ended in the cold, harsh reality of a nightmare. The gilded cage had been shattered and Arabella was left standing in the ruins, her heart broken, her future uncertain. But as she looked at the fierce, protective woman beside her, she knew one thing for sure. She was not alone in this fight, and the wrath of a woman scorned was nothing compared to the fury of a mother and a mother-in-law united in their quest for justice. The unraveling had begun, and it was about to get a whole lot messier. The week that followed was the longest of Arabella's life. On the surface, she maintained a facade of normalcy. She returned to her penthouse, the opulent space now feeling cold and alien. She spoke to Remy on the phone each day, her voice a carefully calibrated mix of wifely affection and mild disappointment, a performance that deserved an Oscar. Each lie he told, every casual mention of a grueling negotiation or a late-night meeting, was a fresh stab to her already wounded heart. She would end each call and immediately relay the details to Bellamy, who was compiling a dossier of his deceit with the meticulousness of a seasoned prosecutor. Bellamy, for her part, had transformed into a veritable commander-in-chief. Her Hamptons estate had become their war room, a hub of quiet, relentless activity. David Chen, the private investigator, was proving to be worth every penny of his exorbitant fee. He was a ghost, a digital phantom, who moved through the labyrinthine world of offshore accounts and corporate espionage with terrifying efficiency. He had unearthed the full extent of Remy's financial entanglement with Lara Vance. It wasn't just a transfer of stock. Remy had been systematically funneling money into Lara's company, propping up his own competitor in a move that defied all business logic. He was sabotaging himself, bleeding his own empire dry. "It makes no sense," Arabella had said, staring at the complex flowcharts David had prepared. "Why would he destroy everything he's worked for?" "There are two things that make powerful men do stupid things," my dear Bellamy had replied, her voice laced with a weary cynicism. "Ego and obsession. And it appears my son is suffering from a terminal case of both." The final piece of the puzzle arrived via a secured email from David Chen 4 days after the baby shower. It was a short, grainy video clip covertly filmed by one of David's contacts in Singapore. The footage showed the interior of a high-end restaurant. At a secluded table, Remy and Lara were seated opposite each other. They were holding hands across the table, their heads close together. But it wasn't the intimacy that was shocking. It was the document they were signing. David had managed to get a surprisingly clear shot of the paperwork. It was a prenuptial agreement. Arabella felt the air leave her lungs. A prenup. He was planning to marry Lara Vance. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her entire marriage, their life together, their unborn child. It was all a sham, a placeholder, until he could be with the woman he truly wanted. The canceled baby shower wasn't just an excuse for a trip. It was a calculated step in his plan to exit their marriage. He had needed to be out of the country, away from her, to finalize his future with someone else. The video continued. After signing the papers, Remy had reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He had opened it to reveal a diamond ring, a gaudy, ostentatious thing that dwarfed the elegant classic diamond he had given Arabella. Lara had gasped, her face illuminated by the flash of the enormous stone. She had kissed him then, a long, passionate kiss that made Arabella's stomach churn. She couldn't watch any more. She slammed the laptop shut, a strangled sob escaping her lips. This was a level of betrayal so profound, so monstrous, that it defied comprehension. The bastard, Bellamy whispered, her face pale. For the first time, Arabella saw a flicker of pain in the older woman's eyes, the deep personal hurt of a mother who has discovered her son is a stranger. But it was quickly replaced by that familiar, steely resolve. "This changes everything," Bellamy said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is no longer just about infidelity. This is about fraud. Bigamy, practically. He's planning to leave you, Arabella. And he's trying to hide his assets to ensure you and your daughter get nothing." A cold, righteous fury began to burn through Arabella's grief. He was going to discard her like she was nothing. He was going to abandon his own child. The image of his hand on her pregnant belly, the memory of his promises to make it up to her now, seemed like a grotesque mockery. "What do we do?" Arabella asked, her voice shaking but firm. "We fight," Bellamy declared. "But not in a courtroom, not yet. A public, messy divorce is what he would expect. It would get dragged out for years and he would use his money and his power to crush you. No, we are going to be smarter. We are going to hit him where he is most vulnerable." His company. Precisely, Bellamy confirmed. Remy's entire identity is tied up in Dunn Enterprises. His reputation, his power, his ego, it all stems from that glass tower on Wall Street. We are going to expose him, not just as a cheating husband, but as a fraudulent, incompetent CEO who is actively sabotaging his own company for a woman. The plan they hatched was audacious, a high-stakes corporate power play that would have made Remy himself proud. Bellamy, it turned out, was not just a society matriarch. Her late husband had left her a significant non-controlling stake in Dunn Enterprises, a fact that Remy, in his arrogance, had largely overlooked. For years she had been a silent partner, but she had a seat on the board, and more importantly, she had the respect of the other board members, old money stalwarts who had known her family for decades. Their first move was to quietly reach out to these board members, men and women who were already growing concerned about the company's erratic performance and Remy's increasingly secretive behavior. Bellamy, with Arabella by her side, arranged a series of discreet meetings in the private rooms of exclusive city clubs. Arabella at first had been nervous. What could she, an art curator, possibly contribute to these high-powered meetings? But Bellamy had insisted. "They need to see you," she had said. "They need to see the woman he has betrayed. They need to see the mother of his child. Your presence is more powerful than any financial statement." And she was right. As Arabella, her pregnancy now beautifully apparent, sat in on these meetings, she didn't have to say a word. Her quiet dignity, her visible pain spoke volumes. Bellamy would lay out the evidence David Chen had gathered, the stock transfers, the offshore accounts, the proof of Remy's financial entanglement with a direct competitor. She didn't reveal the details of the affair, framing it instead as a case of extreme and bafflingly poor judgment that was putting the entire company at risk. The board was horrified. Remy, the golden boy, the visionary leader, was acting like a reckless fool. His loyalty, which had once been solely to his company, was now compromised. The tide was turning. The whispers of a no-confidence vote began to circulate. But they needed a final, undeniable piece of evidence, a smoking gun that would leave no room for doubt. It was during this tense period of plotting and waiting that an unexpected ally emerged. A woman named Sophia Rossi, Remy's long-suffering executive assistant. Sophia was a sharp, fiercely competent woman in her late 40s who had been with Remy since the beginning. She had seen the company grow from a tiny startup to a global powerhouse, and her loyalty to Dunn Enterprises was absolute. Bellamy, sensing a potential ally, had invited Sophia for lunch, under the guise of discussing Remy's schedule. Over salads at a quiet restaurant, Bellamy had carefully broached the subject of the company's recent troubles. Sophia, a woman who was normally the soul of discretion, surprised them both. Her composure cracked and her frustration poured out. She spoke of Remy's recent erratic behavior, his inexplicable and secretive trips, his new obsession with Laura Vance, whom Sophia clearly despised. "He's not the man I used to work for," Sophia confided, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "He's arrogant, dismissive. He's lying to everyone, including the board, and he's running this company into the ground." Seeing an opening, Bellamy took a gamble. She told Sophia everything. She showed her the evidence of the financial fraud, the photos of Remy and Lara, even the video of the proposal. Sophia's face went white with shock, which quickly morphed into a furious, resolute anger. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew he was lying. The Singapore deal, he made me book the flights. And the hotel, the presidential suite. He told me it was to impress the investors." Her eyes hardened. "He's a fool. And he's going to destroy everything we built." That afternoon, Sophia Rossi made a decision. Her loyalty was not to Remy Dunn the man, but to Dunn Enterprises, the company she had dedicated her life to. She became their inside woman, their spy in the enemy camp. She gave them the final piece of the puzzle they needed. Remy in his hubris had drafted a memorandum of understanding with Lara Vance's company. It was essentially a merger agreement, but one that was shockingly disadvantageous to Dunn Enterprises. It would give Lara's company access to Dunn's proprietary technology and client lists, effectively handing over the keys to the kingdom. He was planning to present it at a specially convened board meeting the day after he returned from Singapore. He believed he had enough support to push it through, and once it was signed, he would announce his engagement to Lara and file for divorce from Arabella. It was his endgame. He's kept the only copy on a password-protected drive in his office safe, Sophia told them. But I know the password. He uses the same one for everything. The name of his first dog, Barnaby. The plan was set. The night before Remy was due to return, Sophia would access the safe, download the memorandum, and email it to Bellamy. Bellamy would then forward it to the entire board along with a formal request for an emergency meeting to discuss the immediate removal of Remy Dunn as CEO. As the day of Remy's return dawned, a nervous electric energy filled the air. Arabella felt like she was standing on the edge of a precipice. The life she had known was about to be obliterated, and what would rise from the ashes was terrifyingly uncertain. But as she stood in her apartment looking out at the city that had once seemed so full of promise, she felt not fear but a sense of calm resolve. She had been a victim, but now she was a warrior, and she was ready for the fight. The final showdown was no longer a matter of if, but when, and it was going to be spectacular. The day of Remy's return was a study in orchestrated calm. Arabella spent the morning at a prenatal yoga class, a picture of serenity that belied the storm raging within her. She moved through the poses, her breath steady, her focus absolute. She was no longer the fragile, heartbroken woman who had wept in the Hamptons garden. She was a woman on the brink of battle, her mind clear, her purpose unwavering. Remy's flight was scheduled to land at JFK at 3:00 p.m. At 3:15, as his town car was likely speeding towards Manhattan, Bellamy Dunn pressed send. An email with the subject line, "Urgent Emergency Board Meeting," regarding the future of Dunn Enterprises was dispatched to every member of the board. Attached was the damning memorandum of understanding, a clear and irrefutable blueprint of Remy's betrayal. The email also contained a concise, scathingly professional summary of his financial malfeasance compiled by David Chen and vetted by a team of forensic accountants Bellamy had hired. There was no mention of his affair, no hint of the personal drama. This was a corporate execution, clean and precise. The email concluded with a formal motion co-sponsored by Bellamy Dunn and two of the most influential board members to convene at 9:00 a.m. the following morning to vote on the immediate termination of Remy Dunn's contract as CEO, citing gross misconduct and dereliction of fiduciary duty. The fallout was instantaneous. A flurry of reply-all emails confirmed the board's unanimous assent. The trap was set. Arabella was waiting for him when he walked into the penthouse. He looked tanned and relaxed, the picture of a man who had just closed the deal of a lifetime. He dropped his briefcase, a triumphant smile on his face, and moved to embrace her. "I'm back, my love," he said, his voice smooth as silk. Arabella allowed the embrace, her body stiff, her heart a block of ice. "Welcome home, Remy," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. He pulled back, his smile faltering as he registered her coldness for the first time. "What's wrong? Are you okay? Is it the baby?" "The baby is fine," she said, stepping away from him. "I, however, am not." A flicker of confusion, then annoyance crossed his face. "Arabella, don't be like this. I told you I'd make it up to you. The trip was a massive success. I'm about to close a merger that will double the company's value." "A merger with Lara Vance?" Arabella asked, her voice dangerously quiet. The color drained from Remy's face. He stared at her, his mouth slightly agape, the confident facade crumbling to reveal the panicked man beneath. How do you know that name? Oh, I know a lot of things, Remy, she said, a bitter smile touching her lips. I know you didn't go to Singapore for a 9-figure acquisition. I know you went there for a romantic getaway with your mistress. I know you canceled our daughter's baby shower so you could propose to her. I have the video, by the way. The restaurant lighting was quite flattering. Remy staggered back as if she had physically struck him. He looked around the room, his eyes wild as if searching for an escape route. Arabella, I can explain. Can you? She interrupted, her voice rising with the fury she had suppressed for so long. Can you explain the millions of dollars of company funds you funneled into her business? Can you explain the prenuptial agreement you signed with her? Can you explain how you were planning to announce your new engagement the day after you divorced me? Leaving your pregnant wife and your own child with nothing. Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the last remnants of his composure. He was speechless. His lies exposed his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. It was then that his phone began to buzz incessantly. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening in horror. It was his work phone. The board members, the executives. The deluge of emails and messages had begun. He was being summoned. What have you done? He whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Me? Arabella laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. I didn't do anything, Remy. You did this. You underestimated me. You underestimated your mother. You thought we were just women accessories to your brilliant life. You were wrong. He sank onto one of the expensive white sofas, his head in his hands. The self-made millionaire, the titan of Wall Street, looked like a broken man. The empire he had built on ambition and deceit was about to be taken from him. My mother, he croaked. She's in on this. She led the charge, Arabella said, taking a grim satisfaction in his despair. She's the one who called the emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. You should probably prepare a speech, though I doubt it will do you any good. He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. Arabella, please. We can fix this. Don't let them do this to me. I'll give you anything you want. The penthouse, a settlement. Just call it off. It was pathetic. The man who had been ready to discard her without a second thought was now begging for her help. What I want, Remy, she said, her voice cold and final, is a divorce. I want you out of my life and out of my daughter's life. My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow with the terms, and they will be non-negotiable. She turned and walked towards the bedroom, leaving him sitting amidst the ruins of his life. She packed a bag, her movements calm and deliberate. She was leaving the gilded cage for good. As she walked past him on her way to the door, she paused. By the way, she said, looking down at him, my mother-in-law threw me a baby shower. While you were in Singapore proposing to your mistress. It was at the Hamptons estate. It was beautiful. All our real friends and family were there. We didn't miss you at all. She saw the final flicker of hope die in his eyes. It was a cruel final twist of the knife, and she didn't regret it for a second. She walked out of the penthouse and didn't look back. The board meeting the next morning was by all accounts a bloodbath. Remy, disheveled and defeated, had tried to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The vote was unanimous. He was stripped of his title, his power, and his office, escorted from the building by security like a common criminal. The board, in a move of strategic genius, appointed Bellamy Dunn as interim CEO, a decision that was met with overwhelming support from investors and employees alike. The matriarch had reclaimed her son's throne. The divorce was swift and brutal. Faced with irrefutable evidence of fraud and adultery, Remy had no choice but to accept Arabella's terms. She got the penthouse a financial settlement that would ensure she and her daughter were secure for life, and most importantly, she got sole custody. Remy was granted limited supervised visitation rights, a humiliating blow for a man whose ego was his most prized possession. Laura Vance, seeing that her golden goose had been cooked, disappeared from the scene as quickly as she had appeared, the sham merger agreement null and void. The last Arabella heard, she was facing her own shareholder lawsuits. 2 months later, Arabella gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl. She named her Bellamy. Life settled into a new, quieter rhythm. The gilded cage was replaced by a warm, loving home. Arabella sold the penthouse, finding a charming brownstone in a family-friendly neighborhood. She went back to work at the gallery, her passion for art rekindled. Her daughter was her world, a constant source of joy and wonder. Bellamy Dunn, the formidable CEO, proved to be an even more formidable grandmother. She doted on her granddaughter, her love a fierce protective shield. The alliance forged in betrayal had softened into a deep, abiding friendship. They were an unconventional family, two strong women and a baby girl bound together by the shared experience of having loved and lost the same man. Remy became a ghost in their lives, a cautionary tale. He faded from the society pages, a fallen star. Arabella would sometimes hear whispers of his attempts to start a new company, but he was a pariah in the business world, a man whose reputation was irrevocably tarnished. He had lost everything. His company, his fortune, his family, all for a fleeting obsession. He had canceled a baby shower, and in doing so, he had canceled his own life. Arabella had learned a hard lesson. She had learned that fairy tales can be built on foundations of lies and that Prince Charming can be a villain in disguise. But she had also learned that she was stronger than she ever thought possible. She had found her own power, her own voice, and in the end, she had gotten something far more valuable than a millionaire husband or a lavish party. She had gotten her freedom, her self-respect, and a love in her daughter that was real and true and unconditional. And that was a happily ever after that no amount of money could buy. The story of Arabella Dunn is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest betrayals can lead to the most profound liberations. It's a testament to the strength of a woman who refused to be a victim and the fierce loyalty of a mother who would move heaven and earth for her family.